The surface of Lake Wateree was still calm when Lily Hartman disappeared in the town of Ridgeway, South Carolina, population 4,162. The June morning arrived with sweltering heat sweeping through the lakeside recreation area, where local families began gathering for what seemed like a peaceful summer day. At 9:50 a.m., Lily's mother waved goodbye through the car window as the 16-year-old girl, holding a cold bottle of water she had just bought from the XtraMart store, stepped onto the narrow dirt path leading to the small lifeguard station by the sandy beach. Lily was carrying her usual green lifeguard bag, the one she had used all week, with a silver stitching her mother had sewn back on the previous summer. The woman in the car watched her daughter's figure gradually disappear behind the rolled trees. The blue of Lily's lifeguard shirt, the last splash of color amid the glaring sunlight reflecting off the lake. What happened in the next 25 minutes would haunt Ridgeway for nearly 2 decades afterward. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Ridgeway, South Carolina, in late June 2000, had the appearance of a quiet, small town where summer life revolved around the Lake Wateree recreation area, a large lake serving swimming, camping, and outdoor activities. The eastern swimming beach area, where a simple wooden-framed lifeguard station was located, was where 16-year-old Lily Hartman worked as a lifeguard throughout her summer break. Lily was accustomed to the summer lifeguard routine, leaving home in the morning, arriving at the lake before opening hours, setting up her post, and watching the water until her shift ended. On the morning of June 26, Lily woke up early, preparing her lifeguard bag with the towel, drinking water, and the lake's walkie-talkie. Around 9 a.m., she left the small house on the road leading to Central Ridgeway. Her mother drove Lily to the lake as usual. On the way, they stopped at XtraMart on Highway 21, where Lily bought a bottle of spring water to take with her on shift. After leaving the store, the car drove a few more minutes before turning onto the road leading to the Lake Wateree recreation area entrance. Lily's mother parked at the lot near the path down to the beach. Lily got out, slung the bag over her shoulder, and walked toward the lifeguard station, following the small dirt path running parallel to the water's edge. Her mother watched her daughter walk a short distance until Lily blended into the stream of visitors preparing to enter the beach area, then drove away to return home. As planned, Lily would finish her morning shift and the family would come back to pick her up. Around noon, when the family returned to Lake Wateree, they looked toward the lifeguard station but found the position completely empty. No Lily, no signs of shift preparation or any activity indicating she was on duty. The family immediately walked along the edge of the sand, checked a rescue equipment storage area, approached the entrance to the lifeguard station, and scanned along the shoreline. They expanded the search to the parking lot, the visitor reception area, and the path Lily had taken that morning, but still could not find her anywhere in the easily observable area. After several minutes of fruitless searching with no signs explaining Lily's absence, the family concluded the situation was beyond their ability to handle. They returned to the parking lot, used the payphone near the lake entrance, and called 911 to report Lily Hartman missing. The 911 call from Lake Wateree was transferred to the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office late that morning, triggering the missing person intake procedure according to 2000 standards. The dispatcher compiled initial data including the last time Lily was seen, her age, physical description, work context at the lake, and the fact that the family had already searched without success. Under state regulations at the time, a teenager disappearing under unusual circumstances at a public location was classified as a priority evaluation case, especially when the absence did not align with the victim's normal behavior. The information was immediately passed to the on-duty investigator handling emergencies, and within minutes, command established the classification potential missing juvenile, elevated concern. A first response team of 3 officers was dispatched to Lake Wateree with the task of verifying the scene, securing the area, and collecting initial data. Upon arrival, they worked with Lily's family to confirm the exact morning timeline, the path Lily took from the parking lot to the lifeguard station, and the areas the family had already searched. The officers promptly established a restricted perimeter around the last seen location, using caution tape to prevent civilians from accidentally entering and disturbing evidence. They conducted a visual sweep meter by meter around the lifeguard station, the rescue equipment storage area, and the strip of sandy beach leading to the water, noting ground conditions, crowd density in the area, and the time gap during which the incident could have occurred. Through discussions with Lily's mother and lake staff, the response team noted that Lily had no history of abruptly leaving her post, no conflicts, or personal reasons that would cause her to leave without notification. Lily's failure to appear at the station at the start of her shift was deemed abnormal and inconsistent with her assigned duties. The officers found no signs suggesting Lily had voluntarily left the area, such as new trails, personal items taken, or indications she had left the lake to meet someone. The preliminary report stated clearly, no indicators of voluntary departure from the location, situation to be handled as a missing person under undetermined circumstances. Along with this, the response team collected detailed identifying information on Lily in preparation for expanding the search and canvassing witnesses in the Lake Wateree area. Additional search teams were mobilized right after the initial response team completed preliminary documentation, with the first operational radius set at 50 to 70 meters from the lifeguard station. The area identified as where Lily should have been at the start of her shift. Officers divided the area into search zones, splitting personnel into small groups, moving in arc patterns to ensure no detail on the ground was missed. The sweep began on the sand surface around the lifeguard station, where one group discovered Lily's personal items scattered in the area between the lifeguard chair and the path down to the beach. A pair of bright-colored flip-flops was the first item noted in view. A few steps away was an aluminum folding chair tipped over on the sand, followed by an unopened bottle of water with the label intact, found right next to the edge of the station platform. Officers also noticed a lake-issued walkie-talkie lying alone beside the chair, not powered on and showing no signs of use. Each piece of evidence was marked at its discovery location with stakes and coded tags and photographed from multiple angles to preserve the original condition before collection. The scene was upgraded to Level 1 protection per Fairfield County protocol, meaning the area had to be fully secured, with maximum restriction on non-essential personnel movement to avoid altering evidence or affecting forensic analysis. A designated access path was established for technicians to enter without disturbing potentially evidence-bearing sand and soil areas. After completing photographic documentation, each item was packaged according to procedure. Flip-flops placed in separate paper bags to preserve scent and adhered dust. The folding chair secured in its folded state to avoid changing its condition. The walkie-talkie powered off and placed in an anti-interference box. The water bottle sealed for fingerprint or surface DNA analysis. All items numbered by time and collector. Concurrently, the search team continued sweeping adjacent areas for additional items or signs of Lily's movement, but found no new details beyond the evidence at the station. After completing evidence recovery, everything was transferred to the Sheriff's Office Technical Analysis Unit for fingerprint checks, fiber analysis, and hair samples, or any signals that could help determine events at Lily's work area before her disappearance. To expand the search radius after evidence collection at the lifeguard station was completed, authorities implemented a larger ground sweep plan, focusing within approximately 300 meters of Lily's last seen location. This area included the extended sanded beach, the gravel-mixed soil behind the station, trails leading from the beach into the sparse woods beside the lake, and the entire visitor parking lot. The search team was divided into small groups, each assigned a concentric search arc starting from the lifeguard station and progressing outward. Groups moved slowly, eyes fixed on the ground to detect any unusual disturbances in sand, soil, or grass. They also noted areas needing re-examination with support equipment. Less traveled paths were marked to prevent overlap during the sweep. Additionally, a K-9 team was deployed to track scent, using odor samples from Lily's belongings to establish an accurate starting point. The K-9 began at the lifeguard station, followed the edge of the sandy beach, then turned toward higher ground where paths from the parking lot converged on the beach area. Lily's scent was clearly detected near the station but began to fade as the distance increased. As the K-9 moved across the dirt clearing leading up to the parking lot, the scent signal strengthened over a few dozen meters before abruptly stopping at the edge of the parking area, precisely at the junction with a road leading out to the Lake Wateree recreation area entrance. The coordination team recorded the K-9 stopping point, marking this area as a possible end to Lily's movement path. Officers continued expanding the search in a fan pattern, carefully checking soil, bushes, tree bases, and all ground around the road from the parking lot to the gate. However, no additional personal items belonging to Lily were found, and no signs of dragging, scuff marks, or any disturbance typically associated with forced movement were observed. The parking lot was examined in detail, including analysis of fresh tire marks, but no clear evidence related to Lily or any suspicious vehicle was identified. Officers noted the number of vehicles present at the time of inspection, but could not link any specific one directly to the time of Lily's disappearance. The search team covered the second and third concentric rings within the 300-meter radius, extending into the sparse woods west of the parking lot. This area had relatively flat terrain interspersed with patches of weeds and red soil, making disturbances easy to spot if significant movement had occurred. However, the ground showed no unusual compaction recently, no clear fresh footprints, and no fragments of fabric or dropped items that could be linked to Lily. All search lanes were numbered and reported back to the coordination unit to ensure no planned space was missed. After completing the full sweep, only 2 points were noted as significant: the lifeguard station area where Lily's items were found, and the parking lot edge where the K9 confirmed the scent trail ended. The absence of drag marks, struggle signs, or scattered evidence along the path from the station to the parking lot led investigators to consider the possibility that Lily left the station area without notable resistance or was subdued in a very short time, leaving no clear ground evidence. The search team's comprehensive report concluded no evidence showed the victim moved deeper into the wooded area. No signs of voluntarily leaving the lake via trails or moving back toward the entrance on foot. Factors from the scene: undisturbed personal items, no unusual path disturbances, scent trail ending at the parking lot, led to a preliminary operational assessment that Lily most likely left the area by motorized vehicle, possibly willingly entering a car or being forced into one in a very brief period before any witness could register an unusual situation. The underwater search team was deployed immediately after the 300-meter onshore radius yielded no further valuable signs. With all efforts redirected to sweeping the water surface and shoreline areas to rule out the possibility that Lily had fallen into the water or met with an incident near the station. The Fairfield County dive team first approached the shallow water right off the beach, where average depth was only 1 to 2 meters, convenient for direct visual observation and manual bottom checks. They moved in a line, each diver spaced a few meters apart to ensure no small objects were missed, especially clothing or items that could be partially submerged in thin mud. The area directly in front of the station was swept twice to check small crevices among rocks and submerged roots, but no signs of any new object out of its natural position were found. As the dive team moved to deeper water, above 15 to 20 meters from shore, they used marker lines to define the operational range and began checking thicker mud layers on the lake bottom, which could retain evidence or slow decomposition if an object had sunk. The water at Lake Wateree that day was not overly murky, but bottom sediment still limited visibility with slight disturbance, forcing divers to move slowly to maintain sight. After nearly an hour of sweeping, the underwater team reported no signs of a body, clothing, or items related to Lily. Concurrently, another group deployed short-range sonar to scan the lake bottom within 100 to 200 meters in front of the station, primarily to detect high-density objects or unusual structures underwater. Sonar sweeps were conducted in parallel lines, moving from shore outward, with each pass overlapping the previous to avoid blind spots. Sonar screen returns showed numerous natural rock clusters, submerged tree stumps, and a few small unidentified objects, but none matched shapes or sizes consistent with a human body or large personal item. Preliminary analysis by technicians confirmed all sonar signals aligned with the pre-mapped features of Lake Wateree's terrain. When both underwater groups completed their sweeps, the coordination unit authorized deployment of a helicopter equipped with FLIR to scan the entire shoreline surrounding the search area. FLIR equipment detects temperature differences on ground, water, and nearby vegetation, helping identify foreign objects, disturbed water, or areas potentially impacted near the time of Lily's disappearance. The helicopter flew wide circles focusing on spots where low vegetation appeared crushed or water showed unusual strong disturbance. However, the thermal data was entirely consistent with a normal lake environment that day, with no abnormal hot spots, cold spots, or traces suggesting a recently submerged or moving object in the water. The shoreline also showed no fresh slide paths into the water or extended footprints from the sand into deeper areas, which are common indicators in cases of someone falling into the lake undetected. The coordination team documented all results from the participating units, divers, sonar, and FLIR, and compiled them into a preliminary report sent back to the on-scene commander. The report stated clearly, in the shallow and mid-depth water in front of the station, no objects, traces, or evidence suggested the victim had fallen into the lake or been pulled underwater. Furthermore, the lake terrain in Lily's work area had a gentle slope, few hazard points, and no strong currents, making the likelihood of a drowning accident occurring without leaving signs on shore or underwater extremely low. With data from 3 independent sweep sources, The possibility of Lily suffering an incident leading to falling into the water was temporarily ruled out within the vicinity of the station. This conclusion reinforced earlier observations that Lily's personal items remained undisturbed at her work position, with no signs of chaos, thereby shifting the investigation focus away from a lake accident hypothesis and toward the possibility that Lily had left the area by other means, unrelated to the water environment at the time of her disappearance. After completing the water surface sweep phase and temporarily ruling out the possibility that Lily fell into the lake, the on-scene commander shifted focus to collecting statements from individuals present at the Lake Wateree area on the morning Lily disappeared. Viewing this as a critical step to reconstruct the sequence of events and narrow the time window of the incident, the investigation team proceeded to identify Tier 1 witnesses, including visitors arriving at the lake from 9 a.m. onward, joggers along the shoreline, 2 families setting up tents in the nearby picnic area, a group of young people preparing to launch kayaks, and maintenance staff from the recreation area's cleaning department. Each witness was approached in order of their arrival time at the scene and their potential vantage point toward the lifeguard station where Lily was expected to work. The team constructed a temporary map to plot each witness's position, helping determine their line of sight and the extent to which they could have observed Lily or any unusual movement. One woman who arrived at the lake with her 2 young children around 9:40 a.m. stated that she saw a teenage girl in a blue swimsuit walking across the sand toward the lifeguard station, matching Lily's description and the timing of her arrival at the work area. About 10 minutes later, when she returned to the parking lot for more items, she noticed no activity at the station, but did not find it unusual since the area was still relatively quiet. A man jogging along the lake reported passing the lifeguard station around 10 a.m., at which time the area was quiet and no lifeguard was present at the post. He also did not hear any screams, splashes, or any sounds suggesting an incident, making the time gap between Lily's appearance and the station being unoccupied particularly noteworthy. 2 teenagers from the kayak group confirmed they were at the boat launch between approximately 10 a.m. and glanced toward the lifeguard station but saw no one there. They noted that they frequently visited the lake and were accustomed to seeing a lifeguard on duty at that hour. This witness helped reinforce the assertion that the station showed no activity during the time Lily should have been on duty. The beach cleaning staff member stated he passed by halfway between 9:55 and 10 a.m., but could not clearly see the station because he was busy transporting equipment. However, he heard no unusual noises. The fact that no one reported hearing loud sounds during this period reduced the likelihood of a conflict or struggle occurring on the beach. A group of visitors setting up tents on the edge of the picnic area, about 60 meters from the station, reported seeing a white vehicle moving slowly through the parking lot around 10 a.m., but could not identify the make or driver. The vehicle stopped briefly before leaving in the direction of the main entrance. Although this statement was not definitive, the appearance of a white vehicle within the time frame of Lily's disappearance was noted because it aligned with the fragmented description previously obtained by the search team from earlier witness accounts. All statements were compiled by the investigation team in chronological order, with each time marker plotted on the scene diagram to pinpoint the period when Lily lost contact and was no longer seen by any witness. The data showed that Lily was observed by one witness around 9:45:60 a.m., heading toward the lifeguard station. After that, no one recorded her presence. The window of 10:15 a.m. became a critical time gap because multiple witnesses passed through the area, yet none saw Lily at her post or around the station. One particularly notable point was that no one reported hearing unusual sounds, making it more plausible that Lily was called away, led away, or left the position very briefly compared to other scenarios. The investigation team continued to probe additional details about the white vehicle, including its stopping location, direction of travel, and time of appearance, even though the witness only caught a glimpse. This statement was classified into the category of notable vehicle leads because it coincided with a scent stop location identified by the K9 team in the parking lot during the earlier search phase. The absence of drag marks, no evidence along the path, and no reports of strangers appearing in the beach area caused the team to focus more heavily on the possibility that a motorized vehicle was present precisely during the time Lily disappeared. After completing the Tier 1 witness collection round, the investigation unit constructed a detailed timeline. Lily was last seen walking toward the lifeguard station around 9:50 a.m. From 10:15 a.m., no witness saw her. Some witnesses noted the area was unusually quiet. a white vehicle appeared during this period. This timeline became the operational foundation for shaping subsequent investigative steps and confirmed that the roughly 25-minute window from 9:50 to 10:15 a.m. was the only time frame during which the incident leading to Lily's disappearance from the entire beach area's observation range could have occurred. Immediately after finalizing the timeline based on Tier 1 witness statements and recording information about a white vehicle appearing during the period Lily disappeared, the investigation team moved to trace Lily's stops before she arrived at Lake Wateree to determine whether any vehicle or individual appeared coincident with her travel. The most significant stop in her journey was the XtraMart store on Highway 21, where Lily stopped that morning to buy drinking water before her mother drove her to the lake. The team approached store management and seized the VHS tape recording the parking lot and entrance area corresponding to the 9:30 a.m. time frame. Due to the nature of 2000-era equipment, the XtraMart camera system had only a single fixed angle with low image quality, frames limited by resolution and slow scan rate, causing any fast movement to appear blurred or streaked. Nevertheless, this remained a crucial data source as it provided the only imagery of Lily before she reached the lake and was an indirect point that could capture vehicles moving near her. Investigators replayed the VHS tape multiple times, slowing down segments to observe motion within the camera's limitations. They identified the moment Lily appeared, around 9:15 a.m. Her mother's car stopped in the third position in the parking row. Lily stepped out, entered the store carrying her wallet, and with no one accompanying her. The footage showed her inside the store for a few minutes before returning to the car with a newly purchased bottle of water, after which both left in the direction of Lake Wateree. Right after documenting Lily's movements, the technical team focused on the surrounding context, particularly vehicles appearing in the frame at the same time Lily exited the car or left the store. At approximately the 7th minute of the footage, the camera captured a light-colored vehicle entering the parking lot from Highway 21, slowing near the entrance area, and then moving into a parking spot at the edge of the frame. Although the image was not sharp, features such as the front bumper shape, hood outline, and body curvature indicated a high likelihood that this was a late 1980s or early 1990s Chevy Cavalier, matching the general description of the white vehicle mentioned by witnesses at the lake. The vehicle appeared in the tape for only a few seconds, as the camera recorded at a low frame rate at that time, making the license plate virtually unreadable and completely obscuring any details of the driver due to the limited angle. The footage showed the driver's side door slightly open, but the camera resolution was insufficient to distinguish the number of people in the vehicle or who might have stepped out at that moment. The technical team increased contrast, adjusted lighting, and enlarged individual frames to clarify further, but results showed the plate only as a noisy, bright patch that could not be decoded by eye or with available software of the era. Officers noted that the white vehicle's appearance in the VHS tape did not directly coincide with the moment Lily left her parking spot, but the time difference was only a few minutes. This was insufficient to confirm any connection but aligned with Tier 1 witness data about a similar vehicle appearing near the time Lily disappeared at Lake Wateree. Additionally, the team checked other vehicles in the footage, but most were passing through or stopping briefly without noteworthy characteristics. The white Chevy became the only vehicle appearing in both the XtraMart context and lake witness statements, leading it to be flagged as a vehicle of interest requiring verification. Although the driver, direction of travel, or license plate could not be identified, the team extracted the clearest possible images from the VHS tape, froze the frame where the vehicle was most visible, and added it to the photographic evidence file. The camera analysis highlighted the significant limitations of technology at the time, but it still played an important role in the analytical chain, providing indirect evidence of a vehicle with characteristics matching the lake description. Officers continued compiling a list of white Chevy Cavalier models registered in Fairfield County and surrounding areas for cross-referencing with initial data from witnesses and the direction of suspicious vehicle checks. Although no direct conclusion could be drawn from the VHS tape, the team determined that the white vehicle at XtraMart was a factor requiring continued follow-up because it formed a temporal link between Lily's last known stop and the scene of her disappearance, reinforcing the hypothesis that a motorized vehicle was involved in the disappearance during the 9:50 to 10:15 a.m. window. The investigation team moved to terrain analysis to identify likely approach points and reconstruct the path Lily walked from the parking lot to the lifeguard station. First, they created an overall diagram of the Lake Wateree recreation area based on lake management maps combined with unseen photographs taken the day Lily disappeared. The diagram clearly showed the main parking lot, the sandy path leading down to the beach, the lifeguard station, scattered low trees along the beach edge, and trails extending toward the picnic area. The walking distance from where her mother parked to the station was approximately 55 to 65 meters depending on the starting point, consisting of two main segments, the first from the parking lot down to the sand area, the second running parallel to the water's edge to the station. This was an open path. However, 3 blind spot zones existed, where any lone individual could be approached without being directly observed by others. The first blind spot was at the transition between the hard-packed parking lot surface and the soft sand leading to the beach. This was a location where vehicles parked in the outer row could block the view, allowing Lily to pass unseen by anyone in the central area. The second blind spot occurred in the low shrub area near the trail, where the grass and sand edges met, creating a narrow strip that sufficiently obstructed sightlines from both the picnic area and the main beach. Someone standing nearby could see the station or water but not clearly view that section of the path due to shrub height and a slight curve in the terrain. The third blind spot was directly behind the lifeguard station, where the ground dipped slightly to form a natural depression. From the beach or main path, someone farther away would not see movement occurring in that depression. When overlaying the 3 blind spots on the map, the team noted that they created positions from which Lily could be approached without entering the line of sight of morning witnesses. Investigators then analyzed approach speed based on the last time Lily was observed around 9:50 a.m. and the first time a witness passed without seeing her, around 10 a.m. With the walking distance taking less than a minute from parking lot to station, the team calculated that if an individual approached Lily immediately after she entered the first blind spot, the entire process of approach, control, and moving her back toward the parking lot could occur in 30 to 60 seconds, well within the time discrepancy provided by witnesses. Another key factor analyzed was the ability to approach without creating noise. The sandy and soft soil surfaces muffled footsteps, while the relatively low crowd between 9:50 to 9:50 Tonel meant any quick action was less likely to attract attention. When evaluating the overall site layout, investigators concluded that such an approach could only be carried out effectively if the subject had prior knowledge of the terrain, knew the blind spots, or had spent time observing Lily beforehand to determine her habits, travel timing, and work location. The path map was marked with points where witnesses stood or moved that day, identifying periods when Lily was likely out of observation range. The gap from 9:50 to 10 a.m. was flagged as the primary window for the subject to act. During this period, witness reports noted no unusual movement, indicating the approach could have been very rapid and precise, leaving no audible signals or signs of struggle. When simulating approach hypotheses based on terrain, the team considered 3 scenarios: the subject waiting at a blind spot, the subject following Lily from the parking lot, or the subject appearing coincidentally at the right moment. Based on distance, timing, and sightlines, the first and second scenarios were deemed more plausible because they required the subject to accurately time Lily's appearance and choose a sufficiently concealed position to approach without being noticed by others nearby. The lack of anyone hearing loud noises or seeing unusual movement also suggested the subject executed the action quickly and with clear intent. Synthesizing the analysis from the map, travel path, potential blind spots, and time gap, the investigation team reached a preliminary assessment that the individual involved in Lily's disappearance most likely had detailed knowledge of the Lake Wateree area terrain, knew how to exploit visual blind spots, and selected the precise moment when Lily separated from the crowd to approach her. This opened 2 possibilities. Either the subject was someone who had previously visited the area and was familiar with it, or had surveilled Lily prior to the event. To supplement the statements already collected from the Tier 1 witness group at the lake area, the investigation team expanded to Tier 2, focusing on individuals traveling on Highway 21 between 9:45 and 10:30 a.m., the time frame overlapping with Lily's disappearance window and the immediate period afterward. Highway 21 was the main road connecting Ridgeway to Lake Wateree Recreation Area and the only route for vehicles entering or exiting the lake area. So any unusual departure behavior had a high chance of being noticed by other road users. Officers set up interview points at 2 nearby gas stations and along the stretch of road with steady morning traffic, approaching drivers present in the area during the relevant investigation window. They also worked with store employees and delivery personnel to identify individuals who may have passed the lake entrance at the exact time the white vehicle appeared at the scene. One pickup truck driver who regularly traveled Highway 21 delivering supplies stated he passed the lake entrance around 10,510 hen and saw a white vehicle with headlights on exiting the lake access road at a speed higher than normal for the short, low-speed limit section. He described the vehicle accelerating so fast that it kicked up a long trail of dust, forcing him to slow down to avoid a collision. However, he could not read the license plate due to distance and the vehicle's high speed. Another witness, a newspaper delivery worker on a motorcycle, reported that around 10 a.m., as he passed the turnoff to the lake, he saw a white vehicle stop near the sparse woods by the entrance, then suddenly accelerating, turning onto Highway 21 and heading south. He did not see the driver and could not clearly view the front seats due to sun glare on the windows, but confirmed the vehicle had a boxy shape and size consistent with an older sedan model. This statement matched the color and timing description from Tier 1 collected at Lake Wateree. Another witness, a regular fisherman at the lake area, did not directly see the vehicle but recalled hearing an unusually loud engine rev from the direction of the parking lot around 9:55 to 9:07 a.m., right before he left the shore to move to a fishing spot a few hundred meters away. Though he did not see the vehicle, he asserted the sound came from a small car, not a truck or SUV, because the engine was light but resonant and revved abruptly. This was the only audio data recorded, yet it aligned with the small sedan characteristics mentioned in other statements. The team continued working with the driver of a bottled water delivery company, who passed through around 10:20 a.m. He reported seeing no noteworthy vehicles at that time, only a few cars parked outside the entrance, none of which were white sedans. This suggested the vehicle may have left the area before 10:20 a.m., consistent with the time Lily was determined missing. Another witness, a resident from a nearby neighborhood, stated that when she drove onto Highway 21 around 10 a.m., she saw a white vehicle traveling close to the shoulder and passing her at high speed. She could not identify the make because it flashed by too quickly, but noted the body was small, light-colored, and moved aggressively when changing lanes indicators suggesting the driver was in a hurry or attempting to leave the area quickly. The team compiled the data from these statements and identified 3 common points. First, the appearance of a white vehicle in the 9:50 to 9:15 a.m. window. Second, the vehicle traveling faster than normal in a low-speed limit area. Third, no witness could read the license plate or identify the driver due to distance, high speed, and poor observation conditions. This was a common limitation of Tier 2 statements, but the repeated patterns in the descriptions still helped narrow the vehicle of interest. The team created a presumed movement diagram of the vehicle based on the statements, marking points where witnesses saw the vehicle or heard engine acceleration. The diagram showed the vehicle moving away from the lake parking lot along the Lake Wateree Recreation Area access road, then merging onto Highway 21 southbound. This matched the fastest exit route and the most logical path to avoid re-encountering people entering the lake during morning hours. Aggregating the Tier 2 statements showed the white vehicle appearing at multiple independent observation points within the same time frame, increasing data reliability. Although the license plate, driver, or final destination could not yet be identified, the team flagged this vehicle as a priority target in the vehicle review list and combined the timing from Tier 1 to strengthen the hypothesis that the white vehicle likely left the Lake Wateree area during the period overlapping with Lily's absence from view, setting the stage for deeper follow-up in the vehicle tracing process. Based on the data collected from Tier 1 and Tier 2 witnesses, particularly the matching timing and description of a white vehicle leaving the Lake Wateree area at high speed, the investigation team moved to a large-scale administrative review to identify all vehicles in Fairfield County that could match the recorded characteristics. The process began by querying the South Carolina DMV system, filtering for all vehicles registered in Fairfield County that were white and fell into the small or mid-size sedan category, consistent with the vehicle type inferred from the XtraMart VHS tape and witness statements. Investigators particularly prioritized models with a slightly boxy body, short wheelbase, and low-sloping rear features commonly seen in late 1980s or early 1990s Chevy Cavaliers, the model that appeared faintly in the video footage before Lily arrived at the lake. After the DMV system returned the raw list, the team screened by color, vehicle type, and model year. The total number of white vehicles in the sedan group in Fairfield County at that time was 63, including Chevy Cavaliers, Chevrolet Novas, Ford Escorts, older Toyota Corollas, and some early Dodge Neons or Nissan Sentra models, whose size and shape were not drastically different when viewed from a distance or through low-quality camera footage. With an initial 63 vehicles, the team had to break the list into smaller segments for prioritization based on criteria: registration year, ownership history, registered address, proximity to Lake Wateree, vehicle condition, and travel distance from the owner's residence to the lake access point. The first classification was geographic. Owners located beyond a reasonable driving radius for the morning of June 26 were temporarily placed in a low-priority group. However, because the vehicle might not belong to the current owner or could have been borrowed by someone else, this group was not entirely eliminated, but moved to a later review tier. The next step involved filtering the list by the most matching body style, with older Chevy Cavaliers and Ford Escorts given priority because their appearance aligned most closely with the vehicle captured at XtraMart. Next, the team cross-referenced the vehicle owners list with records gathered from the Lake Wateree area on the day Lily disappeared. They searched for overlaps between vehicle owners and individuals present near the lake that morning, but found no direct matches, forcing the classification to rely entirely on mobility feasibility and vehicle ownership conditions. To narrow the 63 vehicle list, the team applied a third filter: vehicles owned by individuals with serious traffic violation histories, documented unusual behavior in records, or past involvement in lawsuits, domestic violence, or disorderly conduct. The rationale was that these factors could indirectly indicate risk level or potential involvement in Lily's disappearance, even though they could not yet be considered evidence. This analysis reduced the list to 28 vehicles. The team then conducted a final classification round based on 3 operational criteria: distance from the owner's residence to Lake Wateree, feasibility of the owner being present in the lake area between 9:45–10:15 a.m., and any potential prior connection of the owner to the beach area or lake staff. They created plausible travel timelines for each owner's morning calculated based on distance from home to the lake, average speed, and traffic conditions on the morning of June 26. Owners living too far away or with clear alibis were removed from deeper scrutiny. Those living nearby who had visited the lake in the past or who could feasibly reach the area in a short time were retained in the priority list. The final result left 14 vehicles flagged as requiring in-depth investigation. Each vehicle in this group of 14 was attached to a file containing owner information, address, title transfer history, most recent inspection date, repair records, and any data that could help assess whether the vehicle could have been at Lake Wateree on the morning Lily disappeared. At the same time, the team mapped the residences of the 14 owners across Fairfield County, noting that several individuals lived along the Highway 21 corridor or near roads that could easily lead to the lake. The initial analysis did not yield direct conclusions, but established an important operational foundation, as the number of suspect vehicles was reduced from over 60 to 14, allowing investigators to concentrate resources on detailed checks of each owner rather than spreading efforts across the entire original list. Within the group of 14 vehicles, some belonged to ordinary families with no red flags in their records, but several were owned by individuals with minor criminal histories or past involvement in local disputes. Although no vehicle owner could yet be considered a direct suspect, the team viewed the list of 14 vehicles as a necessary operational starting point to gradually cross-reference with the vehicle appearing in the XtraMart VHS tape, witness statements from the lake, and previous analytical results. Through this review process, the team established a focused, narrowed list, significantly reducing the scope of vehicles requiring verification and laying the groundwork for deeper analysis to identify the white vehicle potentially linked to Lily's disappearance at Lake Wateree. A parallel investigative direction to the vehicle review was launched to determine whether the approach to Lily could have originated from someone familiar with her shift schedule, since her disappearance occurred just minutes after she arrived at her work area, suggesting the possibility that the subject knew in advance when she would appear at the lifeguard station. The team collected a full list of personnel with access to or prior exposure to the lifeguard shift assignments at Lake Wateree Recreation Area, including lake management, 2 staff responsible for shift coordination, 4 lifeguards working rotating shifts, technical support staff, beach maintenance crew, and several individuals who regularly appeared in the area, such as concession stand workers and weekend child safety monitoring volunteers. The initial list totaled 27 people who could have known or seen the shift schedule within the 2 weeks prior to Lily's disappearance. The team interviewed each individual, focusing on 3 factors: level of access to the shift schedule, their presence at the lake area on the morning Lily went missing, and any personal relationship, if any, with Lily. Through this vetting process, many individuals were eliminated because they had no direct connection to the lifeguard operations. Some seasonal workers were not granted access to detailed schedules. Others worked evening or afternoon shifts and were not present at the lake in the morning, significantly reducing the likelihood they had observed or surveilled Lily before the disappearance. The investigative team further eliminated those with no reason to be in the area on the morning of June 26, or who only accessed the lake area but had no reason to be near the lifeguard station. After the first filtering round, the list was reduced to 14 people with direct or indirect access to shift information. The team continued narrowing the scope by verifying each person's work schedule on the day Lily disappeared. Some had later shifts or were off duty that day and were removed, while those present in the lake area between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. were retained in the priority list. By the end of the filtering process, 11 individuals remained who could have known Lily's shift schedule, including 2 managers, 3 lifeguards who had worked alongside Lily on previous days, 1 maintenance worker active near the parking lot, 1 concession stand employee at the lakeside snack bar, and 4 volunteers familiar with area assignment procedures. With this list, the team explored the possibility that the subject approached Lily because they knew in advance when she would be alone at the station. They analyzed each individual's level of information access, who directly viewed the schedule, who might have casually seen the posted assignment sheet behind the staff room, who habitually observed lifeguard activities, and who had opportunities to interact with Lily in the days prior. The lake manager and shift coordinators had the highest access, but both were in the area office throughout the morning and had clear alibis confirmed by multiple witnesses. The remaining lifeguards stated they only checked the schedule upon arriving for work and generally paid no attention to other shifts unless related to shift swaps. However, the team flagged them for morning itinerary checks to determine if any appeared near the station during the time Lily disappeared. The parking lot beach maintenance worker received greater attention because his job frequently brought him close to the path down to the beach that Lily had to traverse. However, initial statements indicated he was busy transporting equipment between 9:50–10 a.m. and noticed no unusual movement. Still, the team kept him on the list of 11 for further cross-referencing with other data. The volunteer group, though without direct schedule access, were regularly present on weekends and sometimes observed lifeguard operations, meaning they could have known Lily's shifts on certain days. However, only one of them was present on the morning Lily disappeared, and that individual stated they did not approach the station during that time. After completing the interviews, the team modeled the possibility of approaching Lily based on the gathered information. A subject who understood the shift assignment process knew Lily was working alone and could anticipate she would arrive at the station between 9:45 and 10 a.m. This raised the possibility that the perpetrator did not act randomly, but had some informational preparation or prior observation. The lack of witnesses seeing Lily after 9:50 a.m. indicated the approach occurred very early, almost immediately after she left her mother at the parking lot, further supporting the hypothesis that the subject had predetermined the moment Lily separated from others. When synthesizing the list of 11 people who could have known the shift schedule and further eliminating based on location, presence timing, and actual access feasibility, the team concluded that the possibility the perpetrator belonged to the group with knowledge of shift information, direct or indirect, was a direction that required continued scrutiny. Although no matches had yet emerged with any identifying data, this step played a crucial role in establishing that Lily's disappearance was unlikely to have been a completely random event and was more likely connected to information about the timing of her appearance at the station, a detail only someone monitoring her or familiar with the lake's operational schedule could have known. After completing the review of individuals who could have known Lily's shift schedule without obtaining breakthrough data, the investigation team expanded the search area beyond Lake Wateree, focusing on the southwestern edge of Manchester State Forest, a large forested area spanning many miles and located less than 2 miles as the crow flies from the lake's parking lot. This area featured an interwoven network of trails, mixed terrain of pine forest, low brush, and leaf litter, providing conditions for a subject to move quickly without easy detection. Because it bordered the recreation area edge and was accessible via several secondary roads connecting to Highway 21, Manchester State Forest was considered a potentially relevant location if the subject had taken Lily away from the lake in a short time after the approach. The command team planned the first search deployment within a 2-mile radius from the intersection of the lake access road and the forest edge, dividing the area into small grid cells on a map to ensure no overlap and no missed gaps. Each search team consisted of field officers, support personnel, and 1 or 2 individuals tasked with marking cleared areas. A K-9 team specialized in missing persons was deployed for support, using scent samples from Lily's belongings to guide through the forest environment. Where scent diffusion is more complex due to humidity and wind, the search teams advanced from the forest edge inward into assigned zones, sweeping for any unusual ground signs, such as broken branches, fresh footprints, drag marks, or objects not belonging to the natural surface. Handheld metal detectors were deployed to detect small items possibly concealed by soil or leaf litter, including keychains, metal clothing accessories, or items Lily might have carried. However, the sparse forest terrain, interspersed with low brush, allowed relatively clear observation, and no objects or traces indicated recent human movement or any other disturbance beyond ordinary pre-existing camping activity signs. The K-9 team, after following routes from starting points at the forest edge, showed only faint reactions at a few trail segments. But the responses were not consistent enough to conclude a trace of Lily, likely due to wind conditions or scents from prior forest users. At trail intersections, the search teams paused to document ground surface shapes and tire marks, but most were old tracks from off-road bikes or small ranger trucks. Old trash bags, bottle caps, and abandoned items in the forest were noted, but none were connected to Lily or the day of her disappearance. Search teams also checked hollow trees, areas of compressed weeds, naturally discolored soil strips locations that could preserve signs of digging or concealment, but recorded no abnormalities. In low-lying areas where rainwater collected, investigators closely examined the ground for fresh footprints or depressions, but the damp surface showed no signs of recent movement. After more than 4 hours of grid sweeping the 2-mile area, the consolidated report noted no evidence recovered, no valuable scent traces detected, and no physical signs that could be linked to Lily's disappearance. Although the forest area was large and had many branching paths, the results of the first search phase confirmed that if Lily had been taken into the forest, it either occurred farther beyond the swept radius or left no sufficiently clear indicators identifiable within the natural terrain context of Manchester State Forest. The Phase 1 results were reported back to command, concluding that no supporting data emerged from this area within a 2-mile radius of Lake Wateree. Based on all data collected from the scene, Tier 1 and Tier 2 witnesses, vehicle review results, terrain analysis, and assessment of access possibilities to Lily within the 9052-1-1015 AMP window, the investigation team entered the phase of establishing an initial suspect group to narrow the pool of individuals requiring consideration. This was a critical step to transform a broad and still fragmented dataset into a focused, selectively filtered list based on clear operational criteria. The team applied 4 groups of criteria. 1. Vehicle primarily a white small sedan. 2. Timing must have the ability to be present at Lake Wateree between 9:30 to 9:15 a.m. 3. Location residence or workplace within a reasonable travel radius to the scene. 4. Behavior, history of disorderly conduct, violence, or recent presence in the lake area. Using the previously narrowed list of 14 vehicles, investigators cross-referenced each owner against these criteria. They gathered residence history, distance from home to the wake, occupation, typical daily schedule, information about cohabitants, and any notable events within 48 hours around the day Lily disappeared. Through this process, the team quickly eliminated several vehicle owners who did not fit, for example, those working out of state on the morning of June 26. Those with documented presence elsewhere via time clocks, or those who no longer owned a vehicle at the time because it had been sold before Lily's disappearance. After the first filtering round, the list of 14 vehicles was reduced to 8 individuals whose mobility and lifestyle context made it feasible for them to access Lake Wateree on the morning of the incident. The team conducted a second screening, this time focusing on behavior and connections to the lake area. Some of the 8 individuals had been seen at Lake Wateree, according to witness accounts, though not on the exact day Lily disappeared, but had habits of visiting for fishing or jogging. Others were noted for frequently driving Highway 21 in the mornings. However, only a small number met all 3 criteria: possessing a matching vehicle, having the ability to be at the lake during the incident window, and having noteworthy past behavior or ties to the lake area. Ultimately, the suspect list narrowed to 3 standout individuals. The first suspect was a man living near the lake area who owned an older white sedan. He had a recorded history of significant family conflict but no criminal record for violence against strangers. Initial statements indicated he was at home on the morning Lily disappeared, but the alibi was not fully verified due to the absence of independent witnesses. His vehicle partially matched the description, but had no specific link to XtraMart or the lake parking lot. The second suspect was a young man working part-time in the nearby area who owned a white vehicle but of a different model from the primary suspicion. He had been reported for causing disturbances to visitors at the beach the previous month, though no violent behavior was documented. Records showed he had a habit of appearing at the lake early in the mornings and sometimes walking nearby trails. However, his travel timeline on the morning of June 26 had not been verified, and the fact that his vehicle differed in body style from the one captured in the VHS footage placed his suspicion at a medium level, not fully aligning with the vehicle data. The third suspect, and the most prominent in the initial list, was Raymond Cutler Sr., residing in the southern part of Fairfield County, about a 15-minute drive from Lake Wateree. DMV records showed Cutler owned a white Chevy Cavalier, matching the model noted in the XtraMart VHS tape. Additionally, the team verified that Cutler had been seen near Lake Wateree in the weeks leading up to Lily's disappearance, according to a lake maintenance worker's account. Some judicial records indicated Cutler had a history of minor-level violent incidents in the past, although he had never been convicted of a felony. This made him an individual requiring close scrutiny. The combination of a man owning a vehicle matching the suspect model, having been observed in the lake area, living within easy driving distance of the scene, and having a low-level history of disorderly conduct, made Cutler stand out more than the other two suspects. The team further assessed the timing factor. The distance from Cutler's home to the lake was sufficient for him to be in the area around 9:50 to 10:00 in setting with the time of Lily's disappearance, without requiring a long drive or navigating complicated traffic routes. This increased the plausibility in terms of mobility conditions. However, even though Cutler met many suspicion criteria, the team had to note that no physical evidence directly tied into the scene. There was no DNA, no trace evidence from the scene linked to the vehicle or driver, and no witness description precisely identifying the driver of the white vehicle. Therefore, although internal assessments rated Cutler as the most prominent suspect among the remaining three, the team lacked sufficient grounds to request a search warrant or arrest warrant from the court. Additionally, it must be noted that many of the suspicion elements were behavioral and circumstantial rather than physical evidence. This required the team to continue gathering more data and strengthening the file while still maintaining Cutler as one of the three key individuals to monitor. Establishing the initial suspect list, narrowing from over 60 white vehicle owners to three most fitting individuals, created an important foundation for directing subsequent operational activities, enabling the investigation team to focus on the cases with the highest likelihood of connection to Lily's disappearance at Lake Wateree. Immediately after the initial suspect list was narrowed to three key individuals, but still lacked sufficient physical evidence to proceed with prosecutorial steps, the Fairfield County Forensics Division continued to conduct a 2,000 evidence analysis round to search for any biological traces or contact indicators that could relate to an unknown person at the Dindy location where Lily disappeared. The primary evidence included the flip-flops, folding chair, walkie-talkie, unopened water bottle, and several sand and soil samples collected from around the lifeguard station. These items were examined according to standard protocol, surface cleaning using optical methods, ultraviolet light exposure to detect organic residues, fingerprint scanning, and collection of small microbiological samples for DNA analysis. However, initial results showed that all traces on the flip-flops, chair, and water bottle belonged to Lily or were insufficient in quantity for analysis. The walkie-talkie also showed no unidentified fingerprints. The device surface had been affected by the hot, sunny environment and sand, reducing its ability to retain biological traces. The forensic report concluded that no foreign DNA beyond Lily's could be clearly identified on the items she left at her work area. This did not help narrow the suspect list through biological means, but indicated that if the perpetrator approached Lily, the action occurred quickly, with minimal contact with her personal items, or took place at a location other than where the evidence was found. During the initial search, the investigation team also recovered several small objects near the parking lot, the most notable being 3 cigarette butts with intact filters. These butts were found within a few meters of the spot where the K-9 team lost Lily's scent and close to the vehicle exit path from the lake. At the time, the discovery of cigarette butts was not sufficient to conclude. They were directly related to Lily's disappearance, since the parking lot was a public area with frequent foot traffic. Nevertheless, their presence within the critical time gap prompted the team to collect and place them in long-term evidence storage. The Forensics Division examined the butts using available methods, including preliminary fiber analysis on adhered material, bite mark inspection on the filter ends, and DNA extraction attempts via standard PCR techniques. However, DNA analysis technology in 2000 remained limited, especially for samples with low DNA quantities or those degraded by environmental exposure. Results showed that samples from the cigarette filter tips did not yield sufficient DNA to generate a complete profile and could not be entered into the CODIS system at that time. The butts were stored under controlled temperature and humidity conditions to preserve sample quality as much as possible, in anticipation of future technological improvements allowing reanalysis. Additionally, the forensics team examined soil and sand samples taken from around the lifeguard station to search for any fibers, hairs, or other adhered traces. The sand samples were sieved through specialized filters, but results only recovered small unidentified fibers lacking sufficient characteristics for comparison. No signs of torn fabric, foreign hair, or extraneous objects suggested the perpetrator's presence at the point where Lily left her belongings. The Phase 1 forensic report concluded that 1. No foreign DNA was present on Lily's items. 2. The cigarette butts held potential but could not be analyzed. 3. No evidence of conflict or struggle existed at the lifeguard station. The lack of direct traces forced the investigation team to continue relying on behavioral analysis, witness statements, and vehicle tracing rather than biological evidence. Nevertheless, although it produced no immediate results, this forensic analysis round played a crucial role in preserving evidence for future investigative steps, particularly for items such as the cigarette butts, which were flagged as potentially valuable once technology advanced further. The Phase 1 forensic work concluded with all evidence being resealed, stored in long-term archival conditions, and documented with processing dates, handlers, and sample conditions for future reference. Although the investigation team had conducted comprehensive sweeps at the Lake Wateree area, expanded searches into Manchester Forest, traced vehicles, established a suspect group, and carried out the first forensic analysis round on all scene collected evidence, after many months of continuous work, the Lily Hartman missing persons file still showed no new leads capable of expanding the investigation. The absence of a body, no foreign biological traces, no signs of struggle or secondary evidence combined with DNA analysis at the time yielding no useful results, significantly slowed case progress. The white vehicle seen by witnesses leaving the lake area remained unidentified, despite the list of 14 owners of similar style vehicles having been compiled and checked multiple times. None of them admitted being at Lake Wateree during the time Lily disappeared, and no physical evidence or direct witness statements linked them to the scene. Among all 3 key suspects established, none met the legal threshold for obtaining search or detention warrants, no identifying witnesses, no matching DNA or trace evidence, no related items found on or near their vehicles. The complete lack of intersection between evidence and the suspect list forced the team to reassess the entire case structure under 2000 criteria. A missing persons case could only continue active investigation when indicators of criminal activity or new witnesses existed. After nearly a year without progress, expanded body and evidence searches yielded no results. Additional forest sweeps conducted that fall still recorded no signs of Lily ever having been in more distant areas. Re-interviews of witnesses provided no further information. In-depth investigative approaches such as behavioral profiling, approach modeling, and movement hypotheses could not advance far due to the lack of physical grounds for verification. The Forensics Division also reported that all stored evidence had no further processing potential using 2000-2001 DNA technology. The cigarette butts, the most promising evidence, could not yield resolvable DNA samples due to extremely low cell counts and partial degradation from prolonged exposure to sand and air. Nothing could be compared in CODIS, and there was no basis to request reference samples from suspects without specific criminal indicators. On the legal side, the Fairfield County Prosecutor's Office assessed that the Lily Hartman missing persons file no longer had grounds for active investigation because criminal conduct could not be proven within the jurisdiction, and no new data existed to expand investigative directions. Furthermore, through the end of 2000, no reports from neighboring counties surfaced regarding the discovery of a body, related evidence, or any suspicious individuals matching the vehicle description. All leads ended in disconnected details that could not be linked. The absence of a body also prevented official determination of the case nature: voluntary disappearance, accident, or criminal act. Although investigators believe Lily did not leave voluntarily and the lake drowning accident hypothesis had been ruled out, these assumptions were insufficient to maintain an open investigative file under county operational guidelines. In February 2001, after more than 7 months of active investigation without new traces from the scene, evidence, witnesses, or suspect vehicles, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office officially reclassified the Lily Hartman missing persons case to inactive cold case status, meaning closed but with evidence and information retained for reactivation if new leads emerged. This decision followed the investigation team's final report stating that continued pursuit in the current direction was virtually impossible. The file was transferred to the dedicated Unsolved Cases Archive Unit, accompanied by all sealed evidence and the initial suspect list, which included Raymond Cutler Sr. Despite insufficient evidence to proceed further, transition to cold case status did not mean the case was completely abandoned. Under procedures of the era, the file would be periodically reviewed or reactivated whenever new data arose from outside sources. However, based on everything collected in 2000-2001, the Lily Hartman disappearance officially entered a prolonged period of dormancy, with no progress for many years afterward. 2 years after the Lily Hartman missing persons file was placed in cold case status, Fairfield County conducted its 2003 periodic cold case review per protocol for unsolved cases to determine whether minor procedural advances or changes in witness statements could provide grounds to reopen the file. The cold case team, consisting of 3 experienced investigators, was assigned to re-examine all original data: the XtraMart VHS camera tape, Tier 1 and Tier 2 witness statements, scene diagrams, evidence collected at the lifeguard station, Phase 1 forensic reports, suspect vehicle list, and files on the 3 suspects previously deemed prominent in 2000. Their first step was re-reviewing the VHS tape using newer playback equipment than 2 years earlier, hoping to improve image clarity or enhance visibility of small details such as license plates or driver characteristics of the white vehicle. However, the original recording quality was too low, with limited resolution and slow frame rate, causing all image enhancement techniques to merely clarify noise patterns without improving identifying data. Investigators tried replaying the tape on various devices but obtained no information superior to the 2000 analysis. The white sedan remained a blurry image, with no confirmation of license plate or occupants. Next, the cold case team re-examined all Tier 1 witness statements from the lake area on the morning Lily disappeared. They scrutinized each timing detail, standing position, observation angle, and described behavior, but the statements remained consistent with those from 2 years earlier and provided no basis to suspect inconsistencies or altered information. The witness who saw the white vehicle speeding away from the lake area was re-interviewed, but the person recalled no additional details about license plate or driver appearance. The team attempted to determine whether, in the intervening 2 years, the witness had seen a similar vehicle on other occasions, but the answer was no. For Tier 2, statements from individuals traveling on Highway 21 were re-reviewed, particularly descriptions of engine revving sounds and the vehicle departing the lake in haste. However, no witness provided additional supporting information, and no one self-reported new details since 2001. After the statement review, the cold case team moved to re-examine the locations where evidence was collected, including the lifeguard station, sandy beach, water edge area, and parking lot. They resurveyed the scene using the 2000 map, cross-referencing evidence positions with updated terrain drawings from the Lake Management Department. Scene reconstruction confirmed that the evidence layout fully aligned with the scenario of Lily arriving at the station, but not yet setting up her post. No evidence indicated struggle, scuffle, or forced movement in the area. This led the cold case team to the same conclusion as the 2000 investigation. If an approach to Lily occurred, it was rapid, at a visual blind spot, and left no physical traces. The Phase 1 forensic report was also reviewed in detail, particularly the cigarette butts recovered near the parking lot. The evidence previously considered promising if DNA technology advanced. However, in 2003, DNA analysis techniques were still not powerful enough to process extremely low cell count samples, and the cold case team was forced to conclude that no further analysis was possible. No new DNA samples, foreign biological traces, or unidentified fingerprints emerged in the re-review, leaving all evidence-linked investigative directions stalled. The original suspect list of 3 individuals was also reassessed by the cold case team using 2003 data, criminal records, current residence, vehicle history, and mobility. However, all 3 suspects showed no significant changes in personal records, no new behavioral indicators, and no information suggesting they had ever mentioned or been connected to Lily's disappearance. In fact, one of the 3 had moved out of Fairfield County in 2002, but this contributed no valuable data. The cold case team paid particular attention to the most prominent suspect, Raymond Cuthers Sr., but still found no physical evidence linking him to the disappearance. No witnesses in subsequent years provided additional information about his presence at the lake, and no facts related to his white Cavalier could expand the investigation. The review results showed that every investigative direction from 2 years earlier remained unchanged. No body, no new witnesses, no additional evidence, no technical improvements, enhancing camera imagery, and no suspects eliminated or strengthened based on actual evidence. By the end of 2003, the cold case team completed its case reassessment report and concluded that the file lacked sufficient grounds to resume active investigation. Investigators recommended continued long-term storage of evidence, especially the cigarette butts, and maintaining cold case status pending new signals from forensic sources or future reports. Thus, the 2003 review concluded without producing any leads or breakthroughs, and the Lily Hartman disappearance remained in a state of dormancy, with no progress for many years thereafter. In 2008, after the U.S. Department of Justice expanded STR DNA analysis capabilities for extremely low cell count samples, Fairfield County decided to conduct a new cold case review round to leverage techniques unavailable in 2000 and 2003. The most important evidence re-examined was the 3 cigarette butts recovered near the Lake Wateree parking lot on the morning Lily disappeared, items previously deemed promising but limited by contemporary DNA technology. The State Forensics Division collaborated with a higher-capacity laboratory to implement microbiological extraction procedures, using enhanced STR techniques to isolate DNA from cells adhered to the filter tips. Sample processing began with removal of contaminants embedded in the evidence, primarily sand, oil, organic dust, and bacteria accumulated over 8 years of storage, followed by specific chemical treatments to release residual DNA trapped in the cellulose fibers of the cigarette filters. The process took longer than anticipated due to natural degradation of the samples from 2000 environmental conditions prior to collection. Nevertheless, after multiple signal amplification rounds, the laboratory reported obtaining a relatively complete DNA profile sufficient for entry into the 13-locus STR system standard of the era. Results showed the DNA belonged to an unidentified male, not matching Lily's DNA, nor any lifeguard staff or scene processing personnel on the exclusion list. This marked the first time in 8 years that the case obtained a biological trace potentially linked to an unknown person at the location of Lily's disappearance, raising hopes within the cold case team that STR could identify a specific individual in the recently expanded CODIS database. The STR profile was entered into the national system, searching for matches at local, state, and federal levels. However, CODIS returned no matching DNA profiles to the cigarette butt sample. This meant the individual who left the DNA on the evidence had never been arrested, never had a sample taken in connection with another case, or simply was not yet in the system as of 2008. Although obtaining male DNA represented a major advance compared to previous years, it still did not create a turning point for the case. The new data did not narrow the suspect list due to the absence of a legal database for comparison, nor could broad DNA collection warrants be requested without specific linking factors. The cold case team reassessed the cigarette butts' connection to the time of Lily's disappearance. Although their discovery location matched the K9 scent loss point and was near where witnesses saw the white vehicle leaving the lake, the parking lot remained a public area where many smokers could have been present that morning. Therefore, it could not be confirmed that the DNA on the butts belonged to the perpetrator. It could only be regarded as an indirect signal potentially valuable if a matching profile were found in the future. The cold case team continued reviewing the 3 suspects previously deemed prominent in 2000. The DNA from the cigarette butts did not match any reference samples, still held in their judicial records. But since 2 of the 3 had never formally provided DNA samples, comparison was limited to only 1 suspect, the individual arrested in a minor matter after 2001. Without legal grounds to compel new DNA samples from the remaining 2, cross-referencing was restricted, meaning the new STR data did not expand investigative directions. The investigation team concluded that although STR technology had significantly improved the ability to extract DNA from degraded samples, its impact on the case remained minimal due to the lack of matching data and absence of additional physical evidence to reinforce relevance. The analysis results were added to the file as an important update, noting that the sample belonged to an unidentified male, possibly related or unrelated to the disappearance, and required continued storage for future comparison as technology or CODIS data expanded. By the end of 2008, after compiling all forensic results, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office concluded that the Lily Hartman case still lacked grounds for resuming active investigation. Despite the new biological trace, it did not advance the case toward identifying a specific individual. No new witnesses emerged, no vehicle was located, no reports from neighboring counties surfaced regarding bodies or related evidence, and no developments occurred in the original suspect files. Therefore, the file remained in cold case status, awaiting a technological breakthrough or new community information, something that had not materialized in 8 years. 16 years after Lily Hartman's disappearance, and 8 years since the most recent cold case review, the case seemed to have slipped completely into dormancy until an unexpected event occurred in early October 2016, when a local hunter, while moving through a deep area inside Manchester State Forest, accidentally discovered a strange object partially concealed under a layer of leaf litter and dry branches. The hunter, familiar with the terrain and highly sensitive to anything unnatural, noticed a faded blue-silver piece of fabric caught between two pine trunks. The muted color and material did not match any typical hunting or outdoor clothing in the region, prompting him to stop and examine it more closely. As he bent down to pick it up, he realized it was not ordinary trash but appeared to be part of a swimsuit or synthetic fiber garment commonly used in water environments. The fabric had deteriorated over time, but its original shape was still recognizable enough to make the hunter feel something was off. He decided to take the object back and report it to the Forest Management Office, which then contacted the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. Since the discovery site was just over 3 miles by forest path from the Lake Wateree parking lot, a distance not overly far if viewed from the perspective of deliberate movement. Upon receiving the information, the cold case team immediately went to the scene, recorded the location by GPS, mapped the discovery area, and established a 30-meter restricted perimeter to prevent disturbance of any other potential evidence. The fabric fragment was placed in a specialized paper evidence bag to avoid excessive moisture retention and was promptly transported to the State Forensics Laboratory for preliminary analysis of material, color, and weave pattern, as well as comparison with cold case file information regarding the clothing Lily wore on the day she disappeared. The 2000 file noted that Lily was wearing a dark blue two-piece swimsuit with a smooth fabric surface and fixed stitching in a gentle wavy pattern. Over 16 years of archiving, the description of the swimsuit remained complete because the family had provided photographs and details of the swimsuit Lily wore during her shift. The forensics lab used fiber optic microscopy to examine fiber structure and determined that the recovered fabric sample consisted of polyester blended with spandex, matching the material commonly used in late 1990s swimsuits. At the same time, the fabric exhibited fading consistent with the photographs of Lily's swimsuit after prolonged exposure to sunlight and lake water, a factor documented in numerous cases involving outdoor exposed clothing over extended periods. To rule out random coincidence, the lab conducted dye sample comparison to analyze the chemical composition of the remaining blue pigment, cross-referencing it with a dye database from the same era. Results showed a light reflection spectrum compatible with uniform dyeing processes used on women's sportswear products from the late 1990s, including the specific model confirmed by the Hartman family as the one Lily wore. Although an absolute conclusion was impossible due to severe fabric degradation, the matches in material, dye color, and weave structure led the forensics lab to issue a high compatibility assessment with the swimsuit Lily was wearing on the day she disappeared. The forensic report was sent to the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office just 3 days after receipt of the sample, immediately generating a strong response within the cold case team. For the first time in 16 years, new evidence potentially directly linked to Lily had surfaced at a location deep inside Manchester State Forest, far beyond the Phase 1 search radius from 2000. The fabric's appearance outside the previously searched area suggested that if Lily had been taken into the forest, the body or additional evidence might lie in zones not covered by earlier search teams. Once the fabric was determined to have a high likelihood of relevance, The investigation team immediately expanded the discovery scene, zoning the area in a square grid pattern to ensure thorough coverage of every plot. The marked forest section lay several hundred meters from the main trail, with terrain consisting mainly of sandy soil interspersed with thick leaf litter zones and seasonal water-collecting depressions. Visibility was limited due to tree density and underbrush, making direct visual approach difficult. The team analyzed that if the fabric belonged to Lily, it could have become detached due to weathering, animal activity, or natural decomposition, and the discovery point might not be the original location of the evidence, but merely where it had been transported or blown over many years. However, the deep forest location, far from main paths and not a camping or recreational area, made the possibility of ordinary litter almost non-existent. Therefore, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office approved a new search operation in Manchester State Forest, focusing within a 500 and 700-meter radius of the fabric discovery site. A field forensics team was dispatched to fully document terrain features, photograph the area, collect soil samples, and mark zones showing potential disturbance. The forensics group also surveyed the area to assess the likelihood of wildlife moving evidence, particularly species such as foxes, small black bears, or bobcats, animals known to inhabit Manchester Forest. In addition, a canine team was redeployed, this time focused on detecting residual scent in the deep forest, though expectations were low due to the long elapsed time. Nevertheless, the opening of a new scene in Manchester marked the first time since 2000 that the investigation team had specific grounds to return to the forest with the hypothesis that Lily's disappearance might be more closely tied to this area than previously believed. The initial 2016 survey report was entered into the cold case file as a turning point. The faded blue-silver fabric fragment found in the forest showed high compatibility with the clothing Lily wore on the day she disappeared, and although no definitive biological conclusion had been reached, there was sufficient basis for Fairfield County to reactivate search operations in Manchester State Forest, opening an entirely new investigative direction after more than a decade and a half of deadlock. Immediately after the faded blue-silver fabric fragment was confirmed to have a high level of compatibility with the clothing Lily wore on the day she disappeared, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office upgraded the discovery area to a priority crime scene and deployed a specialized forensic team for human skeletal excavation. The team, composed of state forensic anthropologists in collaboration with the SLE Ground Search Unit, included field technicians, GIS specialists, and evidence collection personnel. Their experience was especially critical because Manchester Forest featured complex terrain, thick leaf cover, diverse wildlife, and a long regional history of evidence concealment in forested environments across South Carolina. The team's first priority was establishing a much wider scene perimeter than the initial fabric discovery point. The area was expanded to a 500-meter radius and later increased to 800 meters after the forensic team identified a likely disturbed soil zone, approximately 120 meters southeast of the original center. The entire zone was marked with painted stakes and divided into a 5x5-meter square grid to facilitate documentation, layer-by-layer soil excavation, and three-dimensional scene mapping. A K-9 unit specialized in detecting decomposed remains was mobilized from Columbia to help identify points likely to contain human tissue or bone. Although more than 16 years had passed, the trained dogs could still react to certain decomposition compounds absorbed into the soil under suitable environmental conditions. On the morning of the first excavation day, the K-9 unit signaled weakly at 3 separate points, but only one lay near the disturbed soil area, visually confirmed by the forensic team. That point was marked as priority and excavated layer by layer using specialized tools such as archaeological trowels, soft brushes, and soil sifting to ensure every fragment of potential value was accurately recovered. Just over an hour later, the forensic anthropologist discovered a bone fragment approximately 3 centimeters long, buried beneath damp soil, showing signs of natural scattering and darkening consistent with human bone exposed in a forest environment for many years. Once identified as potentially human, the excavation protocol shifted to high alert status, and the surrounding grid area was expanded. Additional smaller bone fragments began to appear on the surface, some with broken edges and slight abrasion from animal activity or environmental conditions. The discovery of the first bone fragment prompted the forensic team to systematically reconstruct possible bone movement patterns within the forest space. Based on experience with bodies scattering in natural environments, they determined that the bone showed signs of being dragged along a diagonal path, consistent with the movement patterns of small animals, such as weasels, foxes, or bobcat species, that commonly drag tissue or bone to more secluded locations for consumption or caching. This explained why the bones were not concentrated in a single spot, but scattered in a fan-shaped pattern extending southeast from the fabric discovery point. As the anthropology team expanded the excavation in that direction, more bone fragments emerged. A gently curved rib fragment, a section of long bone likely from a lower limb, and several small fragments lacking clear shape but exhibiting porous human bone structure. All were collected using sterile tools, placed in compartmentalized specialized boxes to prevent mixing, and immediately coded according to the grid coordinate system. Over the first 2 days, the forensic team recovered a total of 14 bone fragments, all exhibiting characteristics consistent with juvenile or adolescent human bone. On the third excavation day, a significant find occurred when the technical team extended the search area another 60 meters southeast. A larger bone fragment, approximately 10 to 12 centimeters long, was discovered embedded in thick leaf litter. After quick examination with a handheld magnifier, the forensic anthropologist confirmed it was likely part of an arm or thigh bone, based on thickness and diameter consistent with an adolescent individual. Nearby, a few meters away, 2 smaller fragments appeared showing signs of animal gnawing, roughened surfaces and irregularly fractured edges. As the excavation team pushed deeper into the forest, the bone distribution pattern became clearer. The fragments lay along an axis extending nearly 200 meters, forming a pattern the anthropology team deemed highly typical, an original deposition site once concentrated in one area, later scattered outward by wildlife in directions that were accessible and less likely to be detected. The pattern matched many documented scenes in the forested southeastern United States. By the end of the third day, the total number of recovered bone fragments had risen to 27, including long fragments, small shards, rib pieces, bone ends, and fragments not immediately identifiable by eye. None retained soft tissue. All showed long-term weathering, pale gray color, smooth surfaces, and many with fine cracking from exposure. At the scene, the forensic anthropologist noted in particular that no bone fragment lay beyond a 200-meter radius from the fabric discovery point, reinforcing the hypothesis that this was not an area where bones had been transported from elsewhere, but rather the original site where a body once existed before animal dispersal. In addition to bone, the excavation team recovered several very small synthetic fiber fragments, apparently from the same material type as the previously found fabric piece. However, these were too small for on-site analysis and were separately sealed for laboratory transfer. Another key observation was the uneven soil compaction in the discovery zone. Certain spots showed signs of prior heavy disturbance, possibly from digging, or from a heavy object resting on the surface for an extended period years earlier. The forensic team photographed the area comprehensively and created a 3D map of the disturbed soil for later analysis. After all bones were collected, coded, and packaged, they were transported to the State Anthropological Laboratory to begin in-depth analysis. The on-site preliminary report documented a total of 27 human bone fragments scattered in a pattern consistent with animal dispersal, the bones likely belonging to an adolescent individual. Location matching the fabric find. No metal objects, restraints, or direct weapon indicators recovered. The discovery of scattered skeletal remains in Manchester State Forest marked the most significant turning point since the case went cold in 2001. For the first time, the investigation team had obtained physical evidence potentially belonging to Lily Hartman, and the entire forest immediately became the new focal point of the cold case file, after 16 years without progress. After the 27 bone fragments were collected and coded at the Manchester Forest scene, all samples were urgently transferred to the State Forensic Laboratory to begin victim identification through 2 independent pathways: traditional skeletal anthropological analysis and modern-level DNA testing, far more advanced than at the time of the case's occurrence. Since the body had fully decomposed and only scattered bone fragments remained, conventional anthropological examination, measuring long bone dimensions, assessing growth plate closure, trabecular density, and epiphyseal fusion, could only provide an initial determination that the skeleton belonged to a young female in the adolescent age range, consistent with Lily Hartman's age of 16 at the time of her disappearance. However, to confirm identity with certainty, the laboratory proceeded with advanced DNA profiling in 2 stages: mitochondrial DNA analysis, particularly useful in heavily degraded bone cases, and nuclear STR analysis at loci still viable for recovery. First, Technicians selected bone fragments with the best preservation density, primarily long bone sections and several intact rib portions. Extracting mDNA from long decomposed bone required an extended demineralization process over several days, followed by purification of any remaining circular DNA that might persist despite widespread degradation. Mitochondrial DNA was prioritized because it is present in far greater copy numbers per cell, increasing the likelihood of obtaining a complete sequence compared to nuclear DNA. Once technicians completed signal amplification and compared the mtDNA sequence to a reference sample from Lily's mother archived in the cold case file since 2000, the results showed a 100% match, confirming the skeleton belonged to the same maternal lineage as Lily Hartman. Because mtDNA only confirms maternal line kinship, the laboratory continued with STR analysis to strengthen the conclusion. STR analysis on bone degraded over 16 years presented significant challenges due to nuclear DNA fragmentation, but two well-preserved long bone fragments yielded sufficient strong loci for comparison with Hartman family reference samples. Although a complete STR profile could not be reconstructed, the remaining loci were sufficient to produce a statistical conclusion far exceeding the threshold for random match probability. The final report stated clearly that msDNA fully matched Lily's mother sample and the recovered STR loci were highly compatible with both her mother and brother, ruling out the skeleton belonging to any other individual. This marked the first time in the 16 years since Lily's disappearance that investigators had indisputable, conclusive identification evidence. Immediately upon establishing the conclusion, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office officially reclassified the case from missing juvenile cold case to homicide investigation. Because the body's appearance in a scattered state, dragged through the forest, and without signs of natural burial clearly indicated that Lily did not leave voluntarily, and her death was not accidental. The file was transferred to state-level homicide investigation jurisdiction, and the investigative team was restructured to focus on reconstructing possible events leading to Lily's remains appearing in the remote area of Manchester State Forest. The successful identification of the skeleton opened an entirely new phase for the case. Every piece of data collected since 2000, evidence, witness statements, suspect list, vehicle analysis, and especially the cigarette butts recovered near the parking lot, now became pieces that could be reconnected under the light of the new forensic conclusion. The Forensics Division's internal notification to the investigating agency stated, "The skeletal remains recovered from Manchester State Forest belong to Lily Hartman. Probability of error less than 1 in a million. The matter should be handled as a homicide file." With this conclusion, the long-standing missing persons case officially became a murder investigation and initiated the next series of investigative actions to identify the person responsible for Lily's death. Immediately after the forensics lab confirmed that the skeletal remains recovered from Manchester State Forest belonged to Lily Hartman and the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office established a new dedicated task force to restart the entire case at the highest priority level. Detective Clara Jennings, a veteran SLE investigator with more than 10 years of experience handling unsolved homicides and exceptional skill in reconstructing timelines from fragmented data, was appointed lead detective. Upon receiving the file, Jennings spent nearly 2 weeks reviewing every document from 2000 to 2016, including all scene reports, witness statements, forensic results, terrain analyses, vehicle lists, and previous suspect files. The confirmation of Lily's death fundamentally changed the nature and scope of the investigation. Data once considered insufficient weight in a missing persons file now became critical pieces of a murder case. Based on the overall assessment, Jennings established 4 core investigative directions to reconstruct the full sequence of events and identify the perpetrator. The first direction focused on the vehicle used in the crime centering on the white sedan, documented from Tier 1 and Tier 2 witnesses in the XtraMart VHS tape. In the original file, this vehicle was only an indirect lead, but with evidence now confirming Lily was murdered and her body disposed of in the forest, the role of the car became extremely significant. It could have been used to remove Lily from the lake, transport the body, or bring the perpetrator to the disposal site. Jennings re-examined the entire original list of 63 white vehicles, concentrating on the narrowed list of 14 and the 3 suspects previously rated as prominent. Among them, Raymond Cutler Sr.'s white Chevy Cavalier continued to stand out most strongly due to its match with the vehicle shape in the VHS footage. The second direction Jennings established was the body disposal location. The appearance of the fabric fragment and bone pieces deep inside Manchester State Forest indicated the perpetrator had deliberately taken the body into the area. Jennings collaborated with criminal geographic profiling experts to evaluate the likelihood that the perpetrator chose the Manchester Forest site based on personal familiarity, distance from main roads, level of seclusion, and terrain complexity. She requested mapping of all possible vehicle access routes from Lake Wateree into the forest without drawing attention, while also analyzing the feasibility of the perpetrator moving the body by dragging, carrying, or transporting it by vehicle. The third direction concerned the body transport and dispersal process, an element deemed extremely critical because the bone fragments were distributed in a pattern characteristic of a body left exposed in nature rather than buried. Jennings directed the forensics team to reconstruct the bone scattering mechanism to determine the original body deposition site, thereby identifying where the perpetrator may have stopped the vehicle or entered the forest. She also considered the possibility that the body was temporarily placed at another point before being dragged away by animals. Understanding the dispersal process accurately would help narrow the zones most likely to contain perpetrator traces within the forest. The fourth direction involved retesting old evidence with new technology. Jennings compiled a complete inventory of all evidence, prioritizing the cigarette butts, soil samples near the lifeguard station, small fiber fragments recovered from the forest, and Lily's personal items. She requested the forensics lab to rerun the entire process using more advanced DNA techniques, including expanded STR and, if feasible, YSTR, or epithelial cell extraction. In addition, Jennings asked for fingerprint re-examination on evidence using new enhancement technologies unavailable in 2000. After establishing these four strategic investigative directions, Jennings had to prioritize to determine which could most quickly produce a breakthrough. Based on existing data, she assessed that pursuing the white vehicle remained the single most important step because the vehicle could serve as the starting point for the entire criminal sequence. If the car and its driver on the morning Lily disappeared could be identified, the entire timeline in the file would become far clearer. Jennings ordered a fresh DMV query, updating ownership status for all vehicles on the list of 14, identifying which had been sold, retitled, or scrapped, and requesting additional information from local garages to trace vehicles that underwent repairs after 2000. Jennings paid particular attention to suspect Raymond Cutler Sr., the individual who once owned exactly the matching make and model. She requested a new report on Cutler's residence history, a full review of his driving record, violations, repair history, and any incidents or allegations of violence after 2000. At the same time, Jennings asked for photographs of Cutler's white Cavalier if any remained in old registration files or state inspection records. Accessing records of deceased or relocated individuals was deemed necessary to determine whether the perpetrator continued using the vehicle long-term or attempted to dispose of it after the crime. In addition, Jennings consulted behavioral experts to assess the likelihood that the perpetrator was someone familiar with Manchester State Forest terrain, since not everyone would select such a deep, secluded disposal point quiet enough to avoid detection. This opened the possibility that the perpetrator was a local resident, someone working near the forest, or at least had prior experience moving through the area. From these initial analyses, Jennings directed the majority of resources toward pursuing the crime vehicle because it represented the link most likely to connect the Lake Wateree scene with the Manchester State Forest disposal site. This decision became the central strategy of the case reactivation phase and the foundation for subsequent investigative steps. Immediately after Detective Clara Jennings identified the crime vehicle as the highest priority direction, she promptly launched a retracing of all white sedans potentially linked to the case, with special focus on late 1990s to 2001 Chevy Cavaliers, the model appearing in the XtraMart VHS tape and matching witness descriptions at Lake Wateree. Compared to the 2000 DMV system, the 2017 database had been fully digitized, allowing retrieval of complete ownership histories, title transfers, inspection dates, repair reports, and vehicle scrap status with far greater accuracy. Jennings submitted a formal request to the South Carolina DMV to filter all white Cavaliers registered in the state from 1999 to 2001, including vehicles later deregistered but still retained in the system. The query returned 142 vehicles, a much larger number than the 63 white vehicles identified in 2000, because this list targeted only the highest probability model. Jennings immediately began layered elimination to narrow the scope. The first step filtered by vehicle status. Of the 142 vehicles, 51 had been scrapped, dismantled, or sold out of state before 2000, making them impossible to have been at the scene. Another 17 belonged to government agencies, businesses, or transport companies with clearly documented schedules and no opportunity to be at Lake Wateree on the morning Lily disappeared. The remaining 74 privately owned vehicles advanced to detailed analysis. Jennings next filtered by geography. She mapped each owner's 2,000 residents using historical DMV registration data, cross-referencing it with period traffic maps to calculate average travel time to Lake Wateree. Owners living more than 70 miles away or in areas where routes to the lake passed toll stations or camera-equipped roads that recorded no white Cavaliers during the 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. window on June 26, 2000, were removed from priority consideration. After the step, 32 vehicles remained within a plausible travel radius. Jennings requested DMV records of title transfers and repairs for all 32 vehicles between 1999 and 2001 to detect unusual repairs immediately following Lily's disappearance. For example, replacement of mirrors, front bumpers, repainting, or windshield work items that could relate to collision damage or efforts to alter vehicle identification. This filtering eliminated 11 more vehicles, most of which had major repairs documented before June 2000 or changed owners shortly after the incident without suspicious indicators. Of the remaining 21 vehicles, Jennings focused on local garage records. She worked with more than 30 garages in Fairfield County and neighboring counties to retrieve repair histories not reported to the state DMV, especially small shops that did not fully report in the early 2000s. By cross-referencing invoices, repair notes, and garage owner statements, Jennings eliminated 9 additional vehicles because records confirmed the owner's locations on the morning of the incident. The remaining 12 vehicles were placed in a core suspect group and analyzed by owner behavior. At this point, Jennings applied behavioral criteria: criminal history, prior convictions related to violence or threats, documented disorderly conduct, neighbor complaints, or any record indicating psychological instability. Several individuals stood out, but only one met all investigative criteria: Raymond Cutler Sr. DMV records confirmed he owned a white 1991 Chevy Cavalier, legally registered in South Carolina at the time of Lily's disappearance. Records also showed no change of ownership between 1999 and 2003, meaning the vehicle was neither sold nor disposed of immediately after the crime. More importantly, Jennings retrieved Cutler's historical residence data and determined he lived only about a 12-minute drive from the Lake Wateree entrance in 2000, perfectly aligning with the ability to reach the scene during the 9050 town, 15 a.m. window. When filtering for travel feasibility, Jennings calculated Cutler's most likely route from home to Highway 21, turning into the lake area, reaching a parking lot, then exiting southbound, exactly matching witness descriptions of a white vehicle speeding away from the lake. Jennings did not stop there. She further queried Cutler's repair history through small garages. One shop in Winsboro recorded minor front-end light repairs on a white Cavalier in July 2000, only weeks after the crime, but the invoice did not specify the cause of damage, only noting unusual cracking. While not direct evidence, this detail drew Jennings' particular attention. When reviewing all 12 vehicles in the suspect group, only Cutler's vehicle possessed all 3 elements: matching body style, plausible geographic proximity, and suspicious vehicle handling history. Jennings added to the file that Cutler had been observed multiple times around Lake Wateree in 2000 by lake maintenance staff, making him stand out even further among suspects. The 2017 DMV Consolidated Report concluded that from the original 142 white vehicles, only one exhibited overwhelmingly high suspicion: Raymond Cutler Sr.'s white Chevy Cavalier. Jennings noted in her investigative log, "Suspect vehicle number 1. All subsequent forensic analysis must focus on the possibility that Cutler's vehicle was present at XtraMart and Lake Wateree." With the new DMV data, the suspect, who once ranked among 3 in 2000, now emerged more prominently than ever. Immediately after, the 2017 DMV data identified Raymond Cutler Sr.'s white Chevy Cavalier as the single most prominent vehicle among all suspects. Detective Clara Jennings shifted focus to the most significant piece of evidence that had always been limited by technology: the 3 cigarette butts recovered from the Lake Wateree parking lot on the morning Lily disappeared in 2000. When first analyzed in 2008, the STR technology of that era only extracted an incomplete profile and found no matching individual in CODIS. However, the 2017 CODIS system had expanded dramatically, adding hundreds of thousands of new profiles, including those from arrests after 2010 and mandatory sampling programs under updated state law. Matching algorithms had also been upgraded, allowing identification of partial matches even in highly fragmented profiles. Recognizing this golden opportunity, Jennings requested the forensics lab to reprocess the cigarette butts using advanced epithelial cell analysis and next-generation STR. The 3 butts were opened under sterile conditions and processed with optimized DNA extraction techniques for aged, cellulose-rich evidence. The new technology recovered significantly more DNA segments than in 2008, particularly of loci previously showing weak signals. Amplification was repeated 3 times to reduce noise and eliminate dropout risk during STR analysis. Once a near-complete profile was reconstructed, the forensics lab uploaded it to the latest CODIS version. Within 48 hours, the system returned a hit, a result the Lily case had never seen in 17 years. The match showed that the DNA profile on the cigarette butts was a 100% match to an individual arrested in 2014 in Richland County for an assault charge, Raymond Cutler Sr. For the first time in the history of the Lily investigation, direct forensic evidence linked a suspect to the crime scene. The forensics report stated clearly, 15-15 loci match, random match probability less than 1 in 10 billion. Conclusion: DNA from cigarette butts belongs to Raymond Cutler Sr. The hit was immediately forwarded to Jennings. She ordered cross-verification to rule out technical error. The Forensics Division conducted an independent parallel reanalysis using a different sequencer and reran the CODIS comparison. Results were identical. DNA from the cigarette butts discarded in the Lake Wateree parking lot on the morning Lily disappeared matched Cutler perfectly. Notably, Cutler's DNA profile only entered CODIS in 2014, 14 years after Lily's disappearance. Therefore, the 2008 comparison could not have identified him due solely to the absence of his profile in the database at that time. This was not a failure of the original investigation, but a limitation of the era's data. Jennings immediately revisited witness reports. The cigarette butts were located precisely where the K-9 team lost Lily's scent, at the edge of the vehicle exit path, exactly the area where Tier 2 witnesses saw a white vehicle accelerate away from Lake Wateree around 10 m on the day Lily disappeared. While the butts could not prove Cutler abducted or killed Lily, they irrefutably confirmed one fact: he was present in the Lake Wateree parking lot on the morning of the incident. Jennings reviewed Cutler's entire file. He owned a white Cavalier, lived less than 15 minutes from the lake, had a history of low-level violent behavior, and had been observed near the lake multiple times in 2000 by maintenance staff. Now, with the DNA evidence, his presence at the scene was no longer speculative, but a legal fact. Forensics also noted that the DNA on the butts exhibited high purity and no mixture, indicating it came from a single individual highly consistent with someone waiting in or near a vehicle while Lily walked toward the lifeguard station. Behavioral experts assessed that the perpetrator may have stopped in this area long enough to smoke, observe Lily, and wait for the right moment to approach at a blind spot on the beach. The DNA match completely transformed the case. Where Cutler had previously been a suspect based on inference and behavior, he now became the only individual with biological evidence at the scene. This prompted Jennings to immediately order re-examination of all old evidence related to the lifeguard station, parking lot, and Manchester State Forest to determine whether any additional DNA could match Cutler or further strengthen the connection. The Phase 3 forensics report closed with the line, "This is the first forensic connection between a suspect and the scene of Lily Hartman's disappearance. The DNA profile is an absolute match to Raymond Cutler Sr." In 17 years, the case had never seen a decisive investigative milestone like this. The successful matching of DNA from the cigarette butts to Cutler's 2014 profile transformed him from a weak suspect into the central figure of the entire task force, marking the most significant legal turning point since Lily's remains were discovered. After the Phase 3 forensics results confirmed that DNA from the cigarette butts in the Lake Wateree parking lot matched Raymond Cutler Sr. Absolutely. Detective Clara Jennings immediately moved to verify Cutler's schedule during the week of the disappearance in order to establish his proximity to the lake area on June 26, 2000. With more than 17 years elapsed, reconstructing the timeline required combining multiple indirect data sources: employment records, vehicle repair receipts, fuel purchases, residence information, and recollections of individuals who interacted with Cutler at the time. Jennings began by retrieving Cutler's old employment records from the auto shop where he worked part-time in 2000. The shop owner no longer retained detailed timesheets, but old payroll ledgers showed Cutler did not work the morning shift on June 26. The owner confirmed that Cutler typically took afternoon shifts or flexible hours, and during the week Lily disappeared, he had requested the morning off for an unspecified reason. While not conclusive, this eliminated the possibility that Cutler was at his workplace during the incident. Jennings next traced his movements through fuel purchase records from gas stations along routes Cutler commonly traveled. His credit card transactions in 2000 were sparse, as he primarily used cash, but a surviving paper receipt and a small garage owner's tax files, where Cutler had repairs done several times, recorded a fuel purchase at a station near Ridgeway on June 25, just one day before Lily disappeared. The receipt did not confirm whether he returned to the station on June 26, but it proved Cutler was in the general area immediately before the crime. Jennings also reviewed historical utility records at Cutler's former residence to assess energy usage patterns during the week of the incident, a technique commonly used to evaluate whether someone was likely home during specific hours. On June 25 and 26, electricity consumption was unusually low, suggesting a high probability that Cutler was not at home that morning. While not direct evidence, it supported the hypothesis that he may have left early. Jennings then expanded the search for new witnesses who might have seen Cutler on the day Lily disappeared. Several residents near Highway 21 were re-interviewed, and unexpectedly, a previously unidentified witness from the 2000 investigation emerged. A now-retired delivery driver who regularly traveled the route to Lake Wateree in the mornings. When shown current photos of Cutler and earlier images, the witness stated he was almost certain he had seen a man matching Cutler's appearance standing next to a light-colored sedan on the roadside near the lake entrance sometime in late June of that year. Although he could not recall the exact date, the witness described the man as having dark hair streaked with gray, a somewhat thin build, and smoking while leaning against the car, matching both Cutler in 2000 and the presence of Cutler's DNA on the cigarette butts. The witness also confirmed the vehicle closely resembled a 1990s Cavalier, with a slightly sagging front bumper and white paint turning yellowish features consistent with Cutler's vehicle repair. Records from July 2000. Jennings recorded this statement as a key piece of evidence, as it not only reinforced the forensic data but also placed Cutler in the lake area very close to the time Lily disappeared. She then cross-referenced Cutler's timeline with the 2000 Tier 1 and Tier 2 witness statements. Tier 1 witnesses reported the lifeguard station area empty from 9:50 to 10:15 a.m. Tier 2 witnesses reported a white vehicle leaving the lake at high speed around 10:10 a.m. When piecing the timelines together, Jennings observed they aligned perfectly with Cutler's possible movements if he left home around 9:30 a.m., arrived at the lake around 9:50 a.m., arrived at the lake around 9:50 a.m., and departed shortly afterward. The 12-minute drive from Cutler's home to the Lake Wateree entrance matched the timing of the Tier 2 witness hearing the vehicle accelerate. Jennings also re-examined the original statement from the maintenance worker who had seen Cutler around the lake multiple times in 2000. The worker recalled frequently observing Cutler driving a white car to the public restroom area near the parking lot, and noted that he often smoked and stood watching people come and go. With the new forensic evidence, this behavior took on entirely different significance. No longer coincidental, it became a potential pattern of surveillance. To further solidify the timeline, Jennings requested comparison with recorded events at XtraMart that morning. The camera showed Lily leaving the store around 9:20 a.m., followed shortly by an unidentified white Cavalier. Now, with the DNA evidence, Jennings seriously considered the possibility that this vehicle was Cutler's, especially since the body shape, hood curvature, and overall length matched his 1991 Cavalier. Nothing in Cutler's file placed him elsewhere on the morning Lily disappeared. Instead, multiple coincidences accumulated, matching vehicle, plausible location, witness confirmation of presence near the lake, and DNA match at the exact area where the K9 lost the scent. Jennings noted in her report, Cutler's movement timeline is now the only model that fully aligns with all Tier 1 and Tier 2 witness statements and forensic data at the scene. The final piece Jennings examined was Cutler's behavior after the day Lily disappeared. Records showed that only weeks after the crime he had minor front-end light repairs done without documented costs. When re-interviewed, Cutler's ex-wife recalled that he became unusually quiet during that period and frequently left the house early in the mornings without explanation. Although her statement lacked independent legal weight, it added weight to the assessment that Cutler's schedule in 2000 contained numerous ambiguities. When synthesizing all the data, Jennings concluded that Cutler was not only present near Lake Wateree on the day Lily disappeared, but appeared precisely during the window when the victim was out of witness sight. His timeline connected 3 key points: XtraMart, Lake Wateree parking lot, lake exit route, forming the first fully unified movement chain since the crime occurred. This provided strong reinforcement of Cutler's role as the primary suspect in Lily Hartman's death. Immediately after Raymond Cutler Sr.'s 2000 movement timeline was established and reinforced with forensic data and new witness statements, Detective Clara Jennings determined there was sufficient legal basis to request search warrants for Cutler's former properties, including the house where he once lived, and especially his personal auto repair garage on the northern edge of Fairfield County, which had been abandoned for many years after Cutler moved in with relatives around 2012. The district court approved the search warrants based on 3 key elements. 1. Cutler owned a vehicle matching the description of the crime vehicle. 2. His DNA appeared at the Lake Wateree scene. And 3. The timeline placed him in the area at the time Lily disappeared. As soon as the warrants were obtained, Jennings led the investigation team and forensics unit to the garage and old metal building with a rusted front door, surrounded by overgrown weeds and clear signs of no human presence for many years. Inside, the smell of old motor oil lingered. The concrete floor was stained with chemical patches, but most items had been cleared out except for a few remaining wooden shelves and a loosely locked tool cabinet. The forensics team began sweeping the scene in an inside-to-outside pattern, collecting dust and soil samples at multiple points for comparison with soil from Manchester State Forest. Jennings noticed a small wooden box perched on top of the tool cabinet, something that looked more personal than work-related. When opened, it revealed a stack of old papers, including maps printed from the late 1990s, one of which was a folded sheet of Manchester State Forest with a small red ink circle marking a location deep inside the woods, very close to where Lily's remains were discovered. Hand-drawn notes on the map suggested Cutler had studied the forest area or needed to remember a specific point within it. This was immediately flagged as critical evidence because it was highly unlikely for someone to coincidentally possess a map marked with the exact body disposal location after 16 years. Continuing the search inside the garage, the forensics team found a dust-covered nylon bag behind the wooden shelf containing several faded blue fabric fragments that appeared torn from a larger piece. Jennings immediately requested ultraviolet light and handheld microscopy on site for preliminary material identification. The fiber structure showed polyester blended with spandex, exactly the composition of the swimsuit Lily wore on the day she disappeared, and matching the analysis of the fabric fragment found in Manchester Forest. Although the origin could not yet be conclusively determined, the presence of matching fabric fibers in Cutler's garage led Jennings to note in the log, "This is the first direct correlation between Cutler's property and the Manchester Forest evidence." When the team opened the trunk of an old abandoned truck in the corner of the garage pickup, without license plates, they recovered a thin layer of soil adhered under the trunk liner. Jennings ordered samples taken for comparison with soil from Lily's body excavation site. After transfer to the laboratory, geological analysis revealed the trunk soil contained the same silica clay mineral profile characteristic of Manchester State Forest subsoil, with organic decomposition levels consistent with the soil layer where bones were found. Within Fairfield County, this soil structure appeared in only 2 areas, one of which was the excavation zone. The match was too strong to be coincidental. In addition to soil, forensics discovered a dark brown stain under the trunk mat, but the mark was too old for immediate analysis. It was sealed and sent for testing to determine whether it was old blood. Furthermore, inside the tool cabinet, they found a rusted folding knife and an old flashlight caked with dried mud. The mud on the flashlight was sampled because its color appeared similar to the mud at the excavation site. Jennings paid particular attention to a folded paper file containing handwritten vehicle repair logs from 1998 to 2002. One entry dated June 30, 2000, just 4 days after Lily disappeared. Repair front bumper, repaint. This aligned with information Jennings had obtained from a local garage that Cutler had repairs done shortly after the crime. The final piece of evidence in the garage that made Jennings pause longest was a small metal box containing old cigarette butts. Most were degraded, but at least 3 still retained intact filters. All were collected for DNA comparison with Cutler and to check whether any matched the Lake Wateree butts. When summarizing all evidence recovered from the garage, Jennings wrote in the report, The garage scene provides three major matches: a Manchester map marked near the body discovery site, fabric fibers matching the victim's swimsuit material, and trunk soil consistent with the excavation site's stratigraphy. For Jennings, these findings not only reinforced Cutler as a central suspect, but also formed a logical chain connecting the Lake Wateree scene, the suspect vehicle, and the disposal site in Manchester Forest, the first fully unified chain after more than 17 years. After evidence was collected from Raymond Cutler Sr.'s abandoned garage and preliminary analysis revealed multiple matches with the Lake Wateree scene in the Manchester Forest disposal area, Detective Clara Jennings proceeded to the critical step of conducting a criminal behavioral assessment using standard FBI profiling to determine the degree of fit between the hypothesized perpetrator's behavioral model and the data gathered on Cutler. She worked directly with an FBI behavioral analysis unit specialist to reconstruct a behavioral sequence from the moment the perpetrator appeared at the lake to the body disposal phase. The first analysis focused on predatory displacement, a deliberate predatory approach in which the offender quickly targets the victim at a pre-observed blind spot. According to the file, Lily left her mother's car and walked toward the lifeguard station around 9:50 a.m. The path had 3 blind spots previously identified by Jennings. In the BAU model, the perpetrator is likely to have surveilled the victim from a distance, waited for the precise moment she entered a no-witness segment, then executed a very rapid approach. This fits the fact that Lily disappeared within a 10 to 15-minute window of time frame, so short that it virtually rules out opportunistic crime unless the perpetrator had prior preparation. When overlaying this model onto the case data, every indicator aligned with Cutler. His habit of appearing around the lake, smoking in his vehicle, watching passers-by, and being present in the parking lot on the morning Lily disappeared. The rapid approach at a blind spot is also a common trait in profiling of opportunistic yet predatory offenders, individuals who typically do not plan long-term but execute short-term plans based on site observation. The BAU assessed that Cutler standing in the parking area, looking directly down the path to the lifeguard station, gave him ideal conditions to identify the exact moment Lily was out of other sight. The second behavior in the profiling model concerned the body disposal location choice. According to BAU analysis, perpetrators tend to select familiar areas when moving a body into a wooded environment, especially one with thick cover, low traffic, easy navigation, and low detection risk. Manchester State Forest fit this model perfectly. Cutler lived not far from the forest, had hunted there, and according to former neighbors, frequently entered the woods during the late 1990s. The forest map found in the garage with a red circle marking the exact bone recovery location was powerful evidence of spatial anchoring, the perpetrator selecting a disposal site based on familiarity and confidence in remaining undetected. The BAU noted in its report, the offender may have visited this area multiple times prior to body disposal. This was not a random choice. Behavioral analysis also detailed the disposal method. The fan-shaped bone scatter indicated the body was left exposed rather than buried. This matched offenders lacking concealment skills but confident that forest density would obscure evidence. An offender familiar with the woods but without experience handling bodies typically leaves the remains in a concealed spot, relying on natural animal dispersal to eliminate traces, precisely what occurred at Manchester. The BAU assessed that the perpetrator knew the forest well enough to anticipate animal scattering, but lacked the knowledge or time to bury or destroy the body. When comparing this model to Cutler's data, every point matched. He had hunted in the forest, possessed navigation and deep woods movement capability without getting lost, and his impulsive yet non-meticulous personality fit the simple, quick, environment-reliant disposal style. The BAU also analyzed post-offense psychological behavior. In profiling, this offender type often experiences a quiet period after the crime, altering routines or behavior, sometimes repairing vehicles or changing appearance to sever scene connections. Cutler's record matched this pattern. He repaired his front bumper shortly after the crime, distanced himself from some acquaintances, reduced hunting frequency, and became more withdrawn in communication. The BAU assessed this as typical of an offender attempting to conceal criminal behavior but lacking full control to overhaul his lifestyle. Additionally, the BAU determined the perpetrator was likely opportunistic rather than explosive, spotting a young, solitary victim in a quiet environment and exploiting the situation without necessarily long-term planning. Lily's disappearance in a short window without strong struggle, signs fit an offender who could use verbal means or create a scenario to lower the victim's guard before control. Finally, when fitting the entire model to Cutler's profile, the BAGU concluded Raymond Cutler Sr. matches 44 primary behavioral elements: opportunistic predatory capability, presence at the blind spot at the correct time, selection of a familiar forest for disposal, and post-offense behavior consistent with an offender attempting concealment but lacking skill. The behavioral report was filed directly, and for Jennings it became a crucial piece confirming that the physical timeline and forensic evidence all pointed in the same direction toward Cutler as the most fitting perpetrator in Lily Hartman's murder. After completing the behavioral analysis and reinforcing the chain of physical evidence related to Raymond Cutler Sr., Detective Clara Jennings moved to the pivotal step, reviewing and cross-referencing all of Cutler's prior statements against the new timeline, forensic, and witness data. Although Cutler had never been formally interviewed as a primary suspect before, he had provided answers to authorities multiple times during the broad 2000 and 2003 investigations. Jennings requested all those transcripts and quickly identified several glaring inconsistencies. The first inconsistency concerned Cutler's location on the morning Lily disappeared. In his 2000 statement, Cutler claimed he was home all morning and only went out in the afternoon to the garage. However, 2000 utility records showed almost no electrical activity at the house during the morning of June 26, directly contradicting the home all morning claim. More critically, Cutler's DNA appeared on cigarette butts in the Lake Wateree parking lot, evidence located exactly where the canine lost Lily's scent and adjacent to the Tier 2 witness route, seeing a white vehicle leave the scene. No reasonable explanation existed for his DNA to be there if he was truly at home as claimed. The second inconsistency arose when cross-referencing the vehicle. Cutler stated in 2000 that he did not use the car on the day Lily disappeared because it needed spark plugs. However, local garage repair records showed he brought the vehicle in for service nearly 2 weeks after the crime, not at that time. Furthermore, the July 2000 invoice specifically noted repair front bumper repaint, consistent with suspicion of collision damage or efforts to conceal traces. The XtraMart VHS captured a white Cavalier appearing right after Lily left the store. The body shape, style, and paint matched Cutler's 1991 Cavalier. His claim of not driving that day directly contradicted this evidence. The third inconsistency emerged when aligning statements with witness accounts. In 2003, Cutler said he did not visit the Lake Wateree area during the summer of 2000. Yet a lake maintenance worker stated he had seen Cutler multiple times around the public restroom and parking lot before Lily disappeared. The new 2017 witness, the delivery driver who regularly passed Highway 21, also confirmed seeing someone resembling Cutler beside a white sedan near the lake entrance around the time of the crime. Both witness accounts directly contradicted Cutler's denial. The fourth inconsistency appeared in lifestyle habit statements. Cutler claimed he did not like the forest and rarely hunted, but former neighbors and relatives stated he spent considerable time in Manchester State Forest throughout the late 1990s. The discovery of a forest map with a red circle marking the disposal site in his garage further proved his prior denials were deliberately false. The BAU also concluded that such denial behavior fit an offender seeking to distance himself from the disposal area. The fifth inconsistency concerned evidence possession. When asked in 2000 whether he owned or left any items at Lake Wateree, Cutler answered no. Yet his DNA appeared on cigarette butts recovered exactly where Lily was approached. Moreover, fibers matching the victim's swimsuit material were found in his garage, and soil in his truck trunk matched the excavation site stratigraphy. These items directly refuted every denial Cutler had made. The final inconsistency involved Cutler's quiet period after the crime. He stated, "I don't remember much about that week. Just a normal week." However, repair records, his ex-wife's statements, and garage logs showed abnormal behavior, rushed vehicle repairs, reduced communication, and apparent tension for weeks. The BAU assessed this response as typical of an offender attempting early concealment. Jennings compiled all inconsistencies into the file, marking each under 3 criteria. 1. Inconsistent with forensics. 2. Inconsistent with timeline. 3. Inconsistent with witnesses. Her 22-page report concluded that Cutler's statements were not only inconsistent, but contained deliberate falsehoods intended to conceal his presence at Lake Wateree and in Manchester State Forest. From there, Jennings and the prosecutor's office began preparing the arrest warrant affidavit based on 3 pillars of evidence: direct DNA at the Lake Wateree scene, evidence recovered from Cutler's former property, and intentional contradictions between his statements and investigative data. With this entire chain of inconsistencies, Jennings noted in the file, Cutler is no longer a suspect. He is the only individual whose physical, forensic, and behavioral evidence fully matches the entire crime pattern. Immediately after the prosecutor's office in Fairfield County completed the arrest warrant affidavit, based on the pillars of evidence direct DNA at the Lake Wateree scene, evidence recovered from Raymond Cutler Sr.'s old garage, and the chain of intentional contradictions in his statements, the district judge signed the arrest warrant in early September 2017. Detective Clara Jennings promptly coordinated with SLE and the Marshal's Service to execute the arrest plan in Camden, where Cutler was living in a small rented house on the edge of town. The tactical team decided to make the arrest at 5:40 a.m., a time when Cutler was likely still inside, and the risk of armed confrontation was lowest. The entire area was secured with an outer perimeter, one team assigned to the front door, while a second team stood ready to intercept any rear escape attempt. Jennings personally commanded, monitoring the entire operation from an observation point 30 meters away. When the team approached and knocked, Cutler took nearly a minute to appear, looking tired, surprised, and showing no sign of preparation for arrest. As the warrant was read, he attempted to say, "I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know anything about that girl." But Jennings immediately ordered the team to restrain and handcuff him due to the risk of resistance or flight. The arrest proceeded quickly and without injury. Cutler was escorted to the vehicle while the forensics team entered to execute the accompanying search warrant. The interior was cluttered but still contained items deemed potentially case-relevant. Inside a metal cabinet near the back door, forensics discovered an old tin box holding numerous deteriorated cigarette butts with partially intact filters. All were seized for DNA comparison with the Lake Wateree scene samples. On a small desk by the window lay a broken blade pocket knife with traces of pale brown dried mud. The mud was sampled because Jennings suspected it might match soil from Manchester State Forest. In the bathroom, a nylon bag containing several light blue synthetic fiber fragments was also recovered. Although immediate identification was impossible, Jennings noted they could further support the hypothesis linking Cutler to Lily's clothing. When the team moved to a small storage shed behind a house, they recovered an old pair of hiking boots with soles caked in fine sandy soil characteristics relatively similar to the body excavation site stratigraphy. All evidence was sealed and transferred to forensics for analysis. During the walk to the patrol car, Cutler remained silent, occasionally shaking his head and muttering that he didn't know why they were doing this. Jennings observed this demeanor and noted that Cutler asked no questions about the nature of the charges. Behavior often seen in suspects aware that authorities possess significant evidence. Upon arrival at the station, he was fully advised of the charges, kidnapping and first-degree murder in connection with Lily Hartman's death. Both charges were approved by the prosecutor because evidence showed Lily was deprived of liberty before being killed and her body deliberately disposed of. Jennings completed the scene report and noted that the additional evidence recovered at Cutler's current residence carried significant corroborative value by confirming physical matches between his 2000 behavior and the Manchester Forest crime scene. Cutler's arrest marked the turning point from a 17-year unsolved file to the formal criminal prosecution phase. Immediately after Raymond Cutler Sr. was arrested and transferred into custody pending prosecution, Detective Clara Jennings, together with the Fairfield County Prosecutor's Office, began the most critical step before trial, systematizing the entire body of forensic evidence according to the standards required for presentation to a jury. This phase demanded absolute precision, not only because the case spanned 17 years, but also because every piece of evidence had to be presented in logical sequence, capable of tightly connecting Cutler's actions to the crime scene, the victim, and the chain of events leading to Lily Hartman's death. Jennings and the forensics team started by organizing all evidence into 6 main groups. The first group was the DNA from the cigarette butts, the strongest evidence directly linking Cutler to the Lake Wateree scene. The forensic file had to fully describe the 2000 collection process, storage conditions, the 2008 and 2017 analyses, the upgraded STR procedure, the completeness level of the DNA profile, and the absolute match result with Cutler's CODIS profile. A logical chain diagram was created for courtroom presentation. Cigarette butt location, K9, scent loss point, direction of the white vehicle's departure, 9:50, T10, 10 a.m. time window. All these elements were connected as an inseparable sequence. The second group was the fabric fibers, including the fabric fragment recovered in Manchester Forest, fibers found in Cutler's old garage, and small fiber fragments collected at his new residence after arrest. The consolidated forensic report required three-level analysis: physical, chemical, and source matching. The fact that fibers in the garage showed spandex polyester structure identical to the forest scene sample became a key link between Cutler and the disposal area. Jennings requested presentation in a parallel evidence line format, meaning each sample from Cutler was directly compared to scene samples so the jury could clearly see the consistency. The third group was the Manchester Forest map with the marked location, a highly behavioral piece of evidence showing the perpetrator had prior knowledge of the disposal site. The forensic report had to prove the map was printed before 2000. The red ink was aged consistent with the paper's age, and it had not been altered. Most critically, the red circle on the map was less than 70 meters from Lily's bone excavation site, a distance too small to be considered random coincidence. To strengthen legal weight, Jennings requested handwriting analysis of the small notations on the map and comparison with Cutler's writing from documents seized at his residence. The fourth group included soil samples from the trunk of the abandoned truck in the old garage and mud on Cutler's flashlight and hiking boots. Forensic geology laboratory analysis determined these samples contained mineral compositions nearly identical to the soil layer where Lily's bones were found in Manchester State Forest. The report had to clearly describe the characteristics: high silica ratio, gray-brown modeling, and matching organic decomposition distribution. Jennings specifically requested a comparison chart between the trunk soil sample and the excavation site soil to demonstrate the match was not merely general but carried site-specific traits. The fifth group was Cutler's movement timeline and indirect but crucial body of evidence combining witness statements, electricity usage records at Cutler's home, work schedule, vehicle repair behavior, and presence in the Ridgeway Wateree area. The timeline report had to be presented minute by minute, highlighting suspicious points: low electricity consumption on the morning of June 26, 2000, no evidence he was home, new witness placing him near the lake entrance, and the white vehicle's departure time matching his feasible travel window. Jennings required the timeline to include a map with estimated routes from Cutler's home to XtraMart, then to Lake Wateree. The sixth group was the XtraMart VHS camera footage, even though the quality was poor. The frame capturing the white Cavalier appearing right after Lily left the store remained a vital narrative link in the forensic chain. The report had to detail the vehicle's body features and compare them to Cutler's 1991 Cavalier. Forensic imaging specialists used image enhancement software to create visual side-by-side comparisons to help the jury visualize the match. Once the 6 evidence groups were systematized, Jennings directed the Forensics Division to produce a comprehensive forensic summary report exceeding 200 pages, in which the evidence did not stand alone but was linked into a unified logical chain. 1. Cutler appeared at the last place Lily was seen. 2. Cutler owned a matching vehicle. 3. Cutler was present near the disposal area. 4. Cutler possessed evidence consistent with the victim's clothing. Cutler exhibited behavior related to concealing or altering the vehicle shortly after the crime. Jennings also requested the report clearly state the combined evidence strength to preempt any possible defense arguments, such as random coincidence, evidence contamination, or irrelevant presence. When the comprehensive forensic report was finalized, Jennings and the prosecutor held an internal review session lasting nearly 8 hours to evaluate the evidence's coherence before trial presentation. Everything was packaged into the file. People v. Raymond Cutler Sr. Forensic Chain, one of the largest forensic case files in Fairfield County history, prepared for criminal prosecution before a jury. The trial of Raymond Cutler Sr. opened in early March 2018 at the Fairfield County Courthouse amid intense public attention because the case had spanned nearly 2 decades and was once one of South Carolina's most intractable missing persons files. The prosecution opened with a coherent presentation lasting over an hour, reconstructing the entire investigation from 2000 to 2017 as an inseparable logical chain, emphasizing that the case was only solved when forensic science, DMV data, witness testimony, and criminal behavior converged on a single individual, Raymond Cutler Sr. The prosecutor began with the morning Lily Hartman disappeared, describing the 9:50 teen Millie's 15 a.m. window when the victim was no longer in view, then guided the jury through each piece of evidence in chronological order. The first focus was the DNA from the cigarette butts at the Lake Wateree parking lot, described as the legal anchor of the entire case. The prosecutor displayed the 2017 STR results, highlighting the absolute match with Cutler's CODIS profile, while explaining why the sample could not have been identified before 2014. When the jury viewed the 15-15 loci comparison chart, many could not hide their heightened attention. This was the strongest evidence confirming Cutler's presence at the scene exactly when Lily vanished. The prosecutor continued with the second group of evidence, the white Chevy Cavalier. Although the 2000 VHS footage was low quality, the prosecution presented enhanced images and technical comparisons showing the vehicle in the tape highly matched Cutler's car, especially when combined with the 2017 DMV data that eliminated all other white vehicles. Cutler's movement timeline, called by the prosecutor the timeline that cannot escape, was displayed on a board. Low electricity usage at his home. New witness placing him near the lake entrance. The white vehicle's departure time matching his feasible travel, and the front bumper repair note just days after the crime. The prosecutor also introduced the third piece of evidence, the Manchester Forest map found in Cutler's old garage, with a red circle marking the exact area where Lily's remains were excavated. A forensic expert testified, confirming the map was printed in the late 1990s, and the red ink was aged consistent with the paper's age and had not been fabricated. Most importantly, the red circle was less than 70 meters from the bone excavation site, a distance too precise to be random coincidence. Next, the prosecutor presented the forensic conclusions on the fabric fragments and blue fibers. The piece found in the forest and fibers recovered from Cutler's garage both had fiber structures matching Lily's swimsuit. A visual comparison chart of the three fiber sources was displayed to allow the jury to clearly see the degree of compatibility. The soil samples from Cutler's truck trunk, matching the disposal site's stratigraphy, were also emphasized, accompanied by the forensic geologist's testimony affirming the match was so specific it was inconsistent with random occurrence. Finally, the prosecutor tied everything together with the FBI behavioral analysis. The behavioral file described the offender as someone familiar with the forest, accustomed to observation, approaching the victim at a blind spot, and disposing of the body in a known area, all matching Cutler. When combining all 6 evidence groups, the prosecutor concluded, no single piece of evidence stands alone, but when they combine, only one person appears at every scene, at every time, and in every behavior, Raymond Cutler Sr. The defense attempted to counter by arguing that the cigarette butt DNA could have been cross-contaminated, and the map was mere coincidence, but the prosecution rebutted each point with scientific data, evidence chain of custody protocols, and independent analyses from 3 different laboratories. The defense also argued that Cutler lacked the physical ability to commit the crime at the time, but the prosecution presented medical records refuting this, showing he was fully capable of deep forest movement. After 8 days of trial, the jury retired to deliberate. They took only 3 hours to reach a verdict. Upon returning to the courtroom, the foreperson stood and announced, "We find the defendant, Raymond Cutler Sr., guilty of kidnapping and murder in the first degree in the death of Lily Hartman." Under South Carolina law, first-degree murder accompanied by kidnapping carried the maximum sentence. The judge read the final sentence. Raymond Cutler Sr. is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Cutler merely bowed his head and showed no reaction as he was led from the courtroom. The prosecutor later noted in the file, "The chain of evidence, forensic, behavioral, and physical, has closed a 17-year case. Justice for Lily Hartman has finally been established." When the sentence of life without parole was pronounced and Raymond Cutler Sr. was removed from the courtroom, the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office officially closed the 17-year investigation file, marking the end of one of the most complex cases in the region's history. The case summary was compiled into an internal report spanning hundreds of pages, recounting the entire journey from the summer morning in 2000, when Lily Hartman disappeared at Lake Wateree, to the identification of her remains in Manchester Forest in 2016 and the completion of prosecution in 2018. The first highlighted point in the summary was the critical importance of long-term evidence preservation. The cigarette butts collected in 2000 initially unanalyzable became the key to solving the case when next-generation STR technology emerged. The report emphasized that if the evidence had not been properly sealed, stored under controlled temperature, and protected from contamination, the DNA data might no longer have been viable for reanalysis. This was cited as clear proof of the principle. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, can become decisive proof when science advances. The second lesson concerned early-stage forensic delay. When the case occurred in 2000, DNA analysis technology was not powerful enough to process degraded samples, leaving the file without a legal anchor to expand the investigation. By 2008, when STR was applied, the DNA profile still had no matching subject in CODIS because Cutler had not yet been arrested for the 2014 assault. The gap between forensic technology and legal database availability kept the case in cold case status for many years. The summary recommended that investigative agencies periodically re-examine evidence with new technology to prevent cases from being frozen solely due to the limitations of their era. The third lesson illustrated the cost of investigative blind spots in the early phase. In 2000, the team focused too heavily on the drowning accident hypothesis and lacked resources to fully pursue alternative directions. Although witnesses had reported the white vehicle tracing was limited by fragmented DMV databases and rudimentary video analysis techniques. The inability to deeply interview potential suspects, including Cutler, narrowed investigative opportunities. The summary identified these blind spots as arising from three causes: lack of technological information, absence of centralized data systems, and lack of modern behavioral analysis techniques. In the report, Detective Clara Jennings noted, "If this case had occurred in 2017, we could have solved it in a matter of months." The fourth lesson demonstrated the value of reactivating cold cases. When the fabric fragment was discovered in 2016, it opened a new direction, and the entire file was re-examined with an entirely different mindset. Instead of searching for the victim, they were now searching for the perpetrator. This shifted the entire case structure and allowed previously disconnected pieces of information to form a complete logical chain. It was the persistent re-examination of every piece of evidence, every statement, and every map that ultimately led the team to Cutler. The summary affirmed that cold cases are not dead files. They are merely files waiting for new technology and data to awaken. The final section of the report acknowledged the key elements that resolve the case: proper long-term evidence preservation, advancing DNA technology, modernized DMV data, discovery of new witnesses, the marked forest map found in Cutler's old garage, and especially the behavioral analysis chain supported by the FBI BAU. Together, these created a multi-layered linkage file in which each piece of evidence reinforced the others, enabling the jury to reach a confident and unanimous verdict. The file concluded with the official summary line: South Carolina 2000 cold case solved. The Lily Hartman case closed after 17 years, through the combination of rigorous evidence preservation, forensic advancement, and investigative perseverance. This marked the final milestone of a long journey filled with errors, gaps, and waiting. But ultimately, justice was restored in accordance with its true value. The story of the Lily Hartman case, a teenage girl who vanished at Lake Wateree in 2000 and was only found after 16 years, with a sentence finalized in 2018, offers many profound lessons that can be applied to modern American life, where technology, law, and community all play important roles in protecting personal safety. One of the most significant details in the story is the cigarette butts collected in 2000, which seemed meaningless at the time, but became the key to cracking the case when 2017 generation STR DNA technology became powerful enough to match Raymond Cutler Sr.'s profile. This reminds us that today's technology not only helps solve crimes, but also supports people in many fields, from security, healthcare, education, to data management. Careful preservation, thorough documentation, and never dismissing any small detail can be the decisive factor in the future. Another lesson comes from the investigative blind spots the 2000 team fell into. They focused too heavily on a single hypothesis and overlooked the possibility of a predator lurking in the community. In modern American life, this reflects the importance of open-mindedness and vigilance. Personal safety does not come solely from trusting the system, but also from the ability to observe the environment, recognize risks, and not ignore unusual signs, such as the white vehicle seen around Lake Wateree by witnesses but not effectively pursued at the time. Finally, the story highlights the role of the community. A hunter who accidentally found the fabric fragment in 2016 reopened the entire cold case. This reminds us that in American society, where individuals hold an important place, community cooperation remains a key factor in protecting one another. The lesson is, pay attention, report anything unusual, and believe that one small action of yours can create a major change, sometimes bringing justice to a family that has waited more than 17 years. Thank you for following the entire 17-year journey to justice for Lily Hartman. If you found this story meaningful, please hit subscribe to join us in the next cases. See you in the next video, where we will continue exploring mysterious files that are unlocked through the power of community and modern science.